Call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Middletown. Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act and laws of 1975, the public has been notified. The Planning Board will meet on February 18, 2015 at 6:30 p.m. in Town Hall. Middletown Planning Board notified the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Star Ledger, and the Two River Times on December 4, 2014. Notice of the meeting was filed with the Township Clerk and posted in Town Hall on December 4th, 2014. All notification for this meeting was given pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Act at least 48 hours prior to this meeting. Roll call.
Mr. Carroll? Here. Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Martell?
Here.
Mr. Perry? Mr. Ostrander?
Here.
Mr. Ashton?
Here.
Mr. Santino?
Here.
Mr. Sheehan? Here. Mr. Wilkie?
Here.
Please rise to salute the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone read the agenda, please.
Under administrative matters, we have payment of vouchers and a capital review by the Monmouth County Park System. There's no old business this evening. Under new business, we have number 2014-213 for Pond Center Associates.
Okay. We don't have any resolutions either. Approval of the minutes for February 4th, 2015. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. So moved. All right, this is an open meeting to the public. Is there anything not on the agenda that the public would like to bring before us this evening? All right, seeing none. We move to payment of vouchers. Carl?
Okay, review the following vouchers. James Gorman Esquire, total of $11,098. Total number of vouchers for T&M Associates, $3,976.31. Grand total for all professionals, $15,074.31. $15,074.31. Make a motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, that brings us to capital review for the Monmouth County Park System.
Good evening. My name is Paul Leitz. I'm the principal park planner for the Monmouth County Park System. I'm also a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, so I'm here to give you a quick overview, our capital development review under Chapter 31 of the Land Use Law of a pole barn we would like to construct at Heath Gardens. So if I can, there's plans up here.
Sure.
So hopefully you all received information in the packets prior to tonight.
same as the first page of our packet,
Correct, I believe that you should have 4 sheets by 17. These are simply enlargements.
Okay.
What we're discussing is, hopefully you're all familiar with Deep Cut Gardens here. It's across the street from Tatum Park. And what we're intending to do is construct a pole barn, a 31-50-foot pole barn for cold storage for a redesign of our maintenance facility. By way of background, we have done some planning in the parks, and we decided to combine operations for both Tatum and Deep Cut together. So it's the same staff, same equipment. So it's a consolidation of our maintenance and operations for both sites. And we currently have an additional parcel that's been a part of the park for quite some time. There is a residence on site and a park manager lives on site for security purposes. We're looking to create a larger, as you can see from the site plan, maintenance area. This is our first stage, would be the construction of the pole barn. And then in the future, if capital funds allow, there would be a maintenance building and then a kind of a reconfiguration of a gravel pad where vehicles are parked for future use. Pretty cut and dry. What I can do is it would be set back 25 feet from Red Hill Road. Here's on the second sheet you can see your typical standing seam, metal roof, metal pole barn with 3 overhead doors and 1 man door. I do have here a set of pictures that weren't really submitted, if you don't mind. We constructed one of these at Wolf Hill Recreation Area in Oceanport recently, so you can pass this around. It's essentially the same design. Whether it be the exact same building, we have to go out and bid, so depending on who the best lowest contractor is for this particular, but these would be, the bid is structured to be the exact same specifications. So essentially, we're hoping to get the exact same building there. The man door would be on the opposite side as what you can see in the photographs. And so simply, there's no water or electric, it's just cold storage, there's no service to the building. What we've done is provided...
Wait, before you flip over, with your 25 feet setback from Red Hill Road.
Red Hill Road.
What elevation is going to face Red Hill Road? Comfortability.
It would be the rear elevation, so the front load, the 3 overhead doors would face interior.
Face interior.
Interior of the site for use by the maintenance vehicle. So as you can see here on our third sheet, here's a detail of the site plan, and here you have an existing gravel area, so you'll have access to vehicles and circulation on site for the future. What we've done is provide a couple of photo simulations. Here's the original view looking down Red Hill Road to the south. You can see there's a decorative wall and a deer fence, and then you see tucked in there would be what the building would look like. And then again, I think you also have this on Red Hill Road looking north. Again, you can see the decorative wall and existing vegetation, and then tucked in here would be the pole barn with the man door. So, as you can tell from the larger site plan, there is kind of a limited area of development that has not affected by severely steep slopes. This is kind of a level area here. You can see it's where the residence on site is built into the slope. Anything beyond that, it's pretty steep drop off. So we have kind of this limited footprint area along the Red Hill Road where we wouldn't be disturbing steep slopes. So that's basically it. Pole barn on a pad for future combined operations for both Tatum and Deep Cut. And the reason why we're considering moving all of this is that currently maintenance for Deep Cut is in the field gardener's cottage, which dates from the Genovese era of the development on the site. And it's a 2-story stucco building. building where you have a staff area on the second floor and you have 2 overhead doors that provide equipment storage. It's really not appropriate for current code for certain kind of material storage. It's not really appropriate, as well as it's kind of in the center of our operations here. It's between our production greenhouse and the horticultural center, and it's kind of in the middle there. It's really only accessed by gravel walking paths. What we'd like to do, part of our future plans for Deep Cut, is to convert that into a public education space. The idea might be, we're still working on that, but to take the second floor and use that more for children's learning or children's library, and that first floor with the overhead doors will be turned into an indoor-outdoor education area. We're limited at Deep Cut as to some of the programs we can offer, because as you can imagine, at a garden, some of our programs will get messy. We want to have, planting and potting courses and other types of things. So we're limited to having that in only one room within the current horticultural center. If we can have sort of an outdoor-indoor space where people can get a lot messier, we can have a lot more programs in terms of working with plant materials and earth and other kinds of things. So that's the long-range plan. Before we can do any of that work, we have to move our maintenance operations. This is our plan for moving forward.
I have a question on your property. On the adjoining lot to the right, there used to be 2 buildings there. Are they still there? 2?
Yeah.
No? In the, no, far. To your right, this way.
Yeah.
Right here, there are 2 buildings in there. So there used to be a ranch house. Is that still there?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's there or not.
There used to be 2 buildings, so they were unoccupied.
We have no future plans for the use of those, so if they're not demolished now, they're probably on our list to be demolished.
Okay, thank you.
One question for you. Understanding that you don't need to meet setback criteria in the ordinance, what is that setback criteria for that zone?
I think in the R45 it's 50 feet.
5 off,
I
right?
believe so. And the problem is that basically we kind of have this slope area. If I were here before you, if I were before the zoning board for a standalone bulk variance, I'd be providing some hardship testimony about the idea that we really, if you push it all the way back, we'd be getting into these steep slope areas. So, and given the current location of the residence, we thought this makes the most sense. And by placing this in what you would consider a front yard area, the building itself, I think, is designed attractive enough that it provides some screening from the maintenance vehicles and some of our maintenance operations that are going to go on, rather than having that in your typical front yard area along Red Hook. The other thing is that our neighbor across the street is us. A couple hundred acres of woods across the street, so we're only impacting our own operations. There's no neighbor there across the street who would have to be looking at the activities. In fact, our nearest neighbor is here to the south, and we're putting this pretty much as far away as we can from that neighbor adjacent to the south.
You're not going to disturb the stone fence or the wall?
No, that's all to be maintained, and we've built our ear fence into that.
Okay.
And you're looking to do this in the spring?
Yes, we're hoping to go. We have capital funds have been committed. We're looking to go to bid as soon as possible.
Okay, anyone else? Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're quite welcome.
Do you need something back to the county? If so, what? Just the minutes?
If the board, different boards have different procedures. Some boards will write a letter to us saying, thank you, here's our comments. Or you can just send us the minutes, something that says that we've appeared before you, we've answered all your questions.
So Jason, the dad would sign that and send that out, so John, you can send it out just saying that they were here and there are no comments, and that gives them a piece of paper.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to new business. 4 ponds. There's no these. Sorry, it's easier than standing.
Yes, I chair a board, and
we always let the people sit. I've been before some boards where you stand for 3 hours straight, and it's like an endurance contest.
Well, that's actually a way to get people to speed up the whole presentation. So, there's much to be said for that, especially in this heat.
And there was one board I was before where a room was a temperature like this, and there was literally a puddle of water at my feet by the time the night was done.
It's usually cold in here.
Yes.
It's usually cold, really cold.
All right, you're on.
Good evening. My name is Bill Harrison. I'm an attorney with Genova Burns LLC, the attorneys for the applicant Four Pond Center Associates LP. I want to thank the board members for being here to hear the application tonight. As most of you are aware, Four Ponds previously appeared before this board with an application for a 342-unit residential development. The application was denied. At that point in time, our firm was retained, so I could spend some nice days with Mr. Gorman in Freehold. As a result of that, there led to some discussions with the township that led to revision of the ordinance for what was permitted on the property. The ordinance changes were adopted, reduced the permitted density, so instead of the previously applied for 342 units, about 370 units were allowed, was limited to 228 units based on the density, which is what we're applying for. Revisions were made to address some of the concerns the board raised in the prior denial, particularly concerning RSIS intersection standards, where there was an issue that we're now fully conforming with that. We have 4 witnesses tonight who will testify in detail that the development conforms to the ordinance standards. We are not requesting any variances. There are a handful of design waivers that we will request from the board. 4 witnesses are Dave Fisher, who is Vice President of Governmental Affairs for K-1180, who will give an overview of the development, describe the project, show you what the buildings will look like. Then we have John Ray, who is our traffic engineer. Then we'll have Ray Papa, who's our professional engineer, and then we'll have Jason Trumpo, who's our landscape architect. We'd like to request, if it's okay with the board, that questions be reserved until all the witnesses are done, because there's a considerable overlap between testimony, but if that's acceptable. Okay, with that, I'd like to call the first witness, Dave Fisher.
Bill, before we begin, let me just note for the record the affidavit of publication, the affidavit of service written orders was included in that jurisdiction. And without going back too far back into history, that litigation wound up then with a consent order and a settlement agreement. And this application is then in conformance with the terms of that consent order and the settlement agreement. And the rezoning of the property occurred at that time.
Fisher, you want to introduce yourself to the board, and by who you're employed?
Let's have your, please raise your hand, swear definitely about the board, because hopefully you know what we got.
Yes, I do.
Just spell your last name. Is it F-I-S-H?
F-I-S-H-E-R, no. Okay.
I mean, for the record, we know also Mr. Fisher practice is a planner as well. Are you testifying in that regard, or are you testifying?
No, not really.
Representative?
I'm really just a fact witness. And as K-1180 is contract purchaser of this property, and I've been working closely with the owner and their engineer and their consultants to help develop the plans that are submitted and before the board today. I've been involved in the real estate business for 35 years. I am a licensed planner, and I've been with K-1180 for 22 years, and I help the company with feasibility work, land acquisition, and securing development approvals for company projects.
You want to describe your involvement with this property specifically?
Sure. After the revised ordinance was adopted, we've been working closely with Nigerian Associates, the traffic engineer, the landscape architect, and the owners to develop the plans that we believe are conforming and meet the ordinance. We interface closely with their engineer because we're using townhouse product that we have developed and built on other sites, and
wanted to make sure that the engineering plans reflected the best opportunity to build those on this site. So with that, I'd be happy to just describe the condition of the property and the proposed development. And there's, I think, 2 waivers that I wanted to highlight. Should I take the microphone with me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The packets that you have there have all of the same exhibits that I'll display. The first one is an aerial photograph.
Just for the record then, so for storage purposes, to make it easier, we're going to mark the smaller ones, not the large ones.
I think that Mr. Harrison mentioned the property is Lot 10, Block 1063. It consists of 67.9 acres, and it's shown on this aerial photograph outlined in red. It's situated with against 2 roadways, Middletown Lincroft Road to the east, and to the north it has access onto West Front Street. The property is still occupied by a vacant office building that was once used by Avaya, and then also temporarily by FEMA employees during the height of the Superstorm Sandy event. There are large parking lots that are still there, and drainage facilities and access roads that service the former office use.
So just for the record then, this is not the same order as our staple, but we're going to mark this particular aerial as A1.
The perimeter is mostly wooded along just about all of the boundaries, a little less so to the north and to the east. It's characterized by 4 man-made ponds, 3 of which are near the frontage along the entrance from Middletown Lincroft Road, and 1 pond is kind of hidden in the back on the western boundary of the property. There's a stream along the southern border of the property, and a tributary that runs north along the western edge of the property. They're both tributaries to Nut Swamp Brook, also known as Jumping Brook. In terms of the proposed development, I'm going to talk a little bit about the mix of housing styles, the townhouses we're proposing, and clubhouse facilities, jogging trails, recreation, and landscape buffers. Before I do that, why don't we just mark this as A2. It's an enlarged aerial photograph of the property, referred to as the existing features map. It's just an enlargement of the site with less property around it. Again, shows the existing condition of the 4 Ponds property. This is a depiction of the proposed site plan, now superimposed on what was the property, but maintaining an aerial photograph around the perimeter. This displays the distribution of 2-story townhome buildings with a roadway network similar to what was proposed during the last application, with a main entrance, divided boulevard off of Middletown Lincroft Road, maintaining an access road from West Front Street, and then coming up with a network of internal private streets that would service the proposed development. The reason for the different colors on the roofs were just to distinguish between the different types of townhouse styles. It's not how we would color them, but we thought that might be helpful.
Mr. Fisher, can I ask, the board has staple packets.
Yes.
So we're not going in any particular order of the staple package. You're going in your order. Are all of these within the staple packets going to get marked? Or, you know, that's all I'm asking. Yeah.
I think They probably should, because I know our traffic engineer will refer to at least one or two of them. So if we want to go in this order and mark them A1 through...
Well, I think we're going to go in the order that you refer to them. So
Yes.
this one here, which is the document that the board has a title on top. It looks like it was done for,
Proposed site.
PowerPoint or something. It says proposed site plan entire property. Is that the same drawing that we're looking at?
Proposed site plan, yes.
So this is A3.
A3. Now, the site plan design, as Mr. Harrison mentioned, in compliance with the revised RM2 or RMF2 zoning, provides for 228 townhomes. They're clustered along that roadway network, and the main access being from Middletown and Croft Road, as I mentioned. The next exhibit is a perspective rendering of that entrance. Should be in your package.
Right.
This would become A4, is that correct?
Yes.
So this would be if you're essentially...
Just so we acknowledge that the exhibit that you're referring to is kind of like, but not exactly, what the board has in front of it, right? It's included within the document that says prospective entry, rendering, main entrance, which also has a detail
of one of the entrance features.
Right. So slightly different than the one that you have on the board.
Right.
That's one of the drawings that are on, that's one of the two drawings that are on this sheet of paper.
That's correct. Yeah, we superimposed an enlargement of one of the entry walls. This would be as if you're, standing elevated a little bit across the street, looking at the entrance into the proposed development. You can see on either side of the entry walls, especially to the left or to the south, this would be one of the ponds that's going to be reconstructed as part of the development. A divided boulevard, and then you can see in the distance kind of the rear of the first townhome buildings that you would approach as you enter the project from Middletown and Croft Road. Talking about the ponds, and there might be more discussion about this, but similar to the last application, we are also relocating two of the existing ponds. And if you refer back to the A2 exhibit, we've done a little bit more work since the last application, because these are the two ponds on either side of the existing entrance that would be filled and relocated and enlarged and enhanced to become part of the stormwater system for the project. We went to the State Department of Environmental Protection. We were able to modify the wetlands delineation for these. They're not considered wetlands. They're man-made stormwater ponds. The DEP agreed that they could be modified and relocated under a flood hazard area permit, and they issued what's called an applicability determination that allows that for that to happen. And we provided copies of those to your professionals. So I just want to indicate that we've done a little bit more work in terms of the environmental requirements for this site, and we're confident that we can secure those permits subject to this board's approval of the project. Let's leave that there. This is simply, on the next page, an enlargement of the site plan that this just drops off the northern connection to West Front Street, so it gives you a larger picture of the development as proposed. And all of these are rendered or colored versions of the site plan that were prepared by our landscape architect. A comment about the open space. This plan has approximately 35.4 acres of open space, which is about 52% of the site. That's a little bit more than the last application, and it's much more than what the ordinance requires, which is 30%. All the townhomes that are proposed are 3-bedroom townhomes. And as I said before, I think 2-story. They have 2-car garages. There's excess guest parking throughout the development plan as part of requirements for street design and parking design by the state. And we're proposing kind of an American craftsman type architecture for this project. for the townhomes. So I'd like to just show
That should be marked A5.
A5.
the enlarged site plan A5.
Just a clarification, it shows, I believe, 3 ponds.
That's correct.
Okay. And
Here's the 4.
The original was 2 up front, existing is 2 up front.
Yeah, this one we're not touching. The southernmost or third pond in a line here remains the same. There's some wetlands around that will be left as is. And of course, this 4th pond is not altered at all either.
I have a question. Do you have to stabilize the buildings that are close to the pond? Because that's not where the pond is right now, pretty much.
Yes, and that area will have to
Stabilize
be
that whole area.
over-excavated. It'll have to be filled and compacted in lifts, and we'll have to make sure that the compaction is adequate for the foundations for those buildings. They're not very deep, and we don't anticipate a problem there, but care has to be taken in order to construct those properly.
Stating again the open space.
Yes, I think we were just over 30 acres of open space, but when you add in the ponds, it's about another 4.5, and that's how we got to the 34.5, which is about 52% of the site. Okay,
And without the ponds, the 30 acres is about 45% of the site.
that's correct. So we're still well and above the 30% as required by the ordinance. Okay. I know that there's another slide in your package that is not a board, which just highlights some of the features of the development. It's called community features. I don't know that you need to mark that. If you want me to read it, you will.
Here's the problem. The board's got it, and they're looking at it, and the public doesn't have it, so, I mean, we can start ripping these sheets out of the packet, or I don't know what to do. I mean, this is, so, I guess one of the questions I had early on was, do you intend to use every one of these, and we'll jump around and mark them? Or there's some within the packet that are not going to be used, and then what are we going to do with them?
There's 2 descriptive slides, and neither one of those are going to be used by any other presenter. I just provided that as information for the board.
So, Harrison, what do you want to do?
You want me to read it?
If you want the board to consider it, it has to be part of the record. If you want them to not be considered, they'll just pull the page out. But if, it's a question of whether you want to go through that in testimony or not.
Do you have a larger board of it so that the public can see it? I mean,
Not of these 2 descriptive
so
slides.
that, well, I mean, I don't want to get too involved in the procedural things here, but so technically the community features sheet that you have in front of you, you've got it in work. It's not part of the record, and Mr. Fisher will describe it in words. My guess is pretty much following the bullet points that you have in front of you, but right now it's not part of the record.
That's fine.
Right, because I mean, it's got a little street light on it and whatever it says, but you want to describe those things, and then just for the record, it's not going to be part of the record. And
That's
so what we have to start.
Well, if he reads it, would be part of it.
Yeah, it reads it.
It's going to be part of my testimony, and I've already mentioned it.
If this wasn't here and went about and said, here's the features of the community, it would be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think that's the way we should proceed, but this way everybody in the room knows what are the features.
Right. Okay. Well, as described there, and I mentioned a few of these already, what we're proposing is a mix of 3 different types of residential housing, townhouse styles, to meet what we feel is the local demand.
I'm sorry, do we have another set of the colored ones so that at least the public
Sure.
can see one or 2, and you can pass it around just so that you see what's on the record, what he submitted, he's just basically repeating it. We don't have enough for everybody in the public, but just take out the suspicious factor.
We might have enough for everyone in the room. I've got smaller sets. So.
Oh, well, okay.
Anyway, The development is made up of two-story townhouses, as I said, 3 bedrooms, 2-car garages. There's a centrally located clubhouse that's here just after the first intersection when you come in from Middletown Lincroft Road. And that clubhouse would provide for typical amenities for a clubhouse that would service a development of this size: a great room, a fitness room, a card room, a small kitchen, and his and her showers and bathrooms. There's an outdoor pool associated with the proposed clubhouse, and I'll show you the detail of that in a minute. And the other features identified on that sheet are recreation amenities in the form of a jogging, walking trail that's essentially around the perimeter of the site. And some of that exists today, for those of you who are familiar with the site, but we're going to have to reconstruct that pathway, and parts of it need to be, actually all of it really needs to be reconstructed, and we've come up with some new alignments to connect to the development and provide for a reasonable network of walking and jogging trails.
Originally, it was a fitness trail, fitness stations as you went through. I don't know if they're still there, if they're over years.
Yeah, there's remnants of some things out there still, including an old beat-up tennis court. Basketball court, I think. But no, we would essentially redo the entire trail so that it's serviceable.
But basically for walking, jogging,
yes,
et cetera, okay.
That's correct. And the other items just listed is the preservation of wooded areas to the extent that we can around the perimeter of the site. We're also adding a lot of landscaping that our landscape architect can speak to, and we're renovating those and enlarging the 2 ponds up front, which will not only enhance the water quality aspects of that water system, but accept drainage from Oak Hill Academy, which is tied into our storm drainage, which our engineer can talk about. The proposed architecture. The first is described as craftsman-style 2-story townhomes, 26 foot wide. That's the next sheet. And
It would be A6.
okay.
And it has that caption on it in the set that the board has, in the folder.
Yes.
So Craftsman style 2-story townhouse is 26 wide.
That's correct. And what that means is each townhouse unit is 26 feet wide. This is the largest of the townhouse buildings. It's 6 units in a row. The prior application had up to 8 units per building. Our maximum is 6. So this is the largest building you would see in terms of the number of units in each building. And so as you can see, the architectural style and the treatments on the buildings, and as we had described in our narrative that was submitted with the application, is indicative of craftsman-style architecture with the shed dormers and all the detailing that's provided there. We think that's an attractive look for the community. These would range in size from about 2,300 to about 2,400 square feet, and there's 74 of these units proposed. The next style townhouse is similar, but a little larger in width and square footage, and it's listed as craftsman style 2-story townhouse, 28 feet wide.
We're going to work that as A7.
And even though the architecture is similar, this is a 4-unit building, so it shows you something that's a little smaller, but each unit is 28 feet, 2 feet wider than the previous townhouse. The layout and model types here are a little bit different, slightly larger than the previous building. They run about 2,400 to 2,500 square feet in size.
I have a question. You have cellar foundations. How far down do they go? I question on that because of the high water table in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. And the cellar foundations are designed as such in accordance with your ordinance. They're categorized as cellars, not basements. And all of those cellars would be situated. We don't have cellars throughout the development. Quite a few of the buildings are slab on grade because of that condition. There is some fill required on this site in order to make the drainage work and for the engineering to be adequate. And so with the combination of areas that we've done in terms of soil explorations and testing the seasonal high water table throughout the property, we've developed the plans where the combination of a little deeper seasonal high water table and fill gets us above that level. And so none of the basement cellar floors are designed, closer to the seasonal high than a minimum of 1 foot above.
All right.
And then the last architectural style, and this is really a little bit of a different design, is what we call master down craftsman two-story townhomes 32 feet wide. So these are the largest. Again, architecturally they're very similar, but they're a much larger footprint, meaning 32 feet wide, and they're deeper. They're about 70 feet deep in order to create a first floor that can accommodate a master bedroom suite. So all of these townhomes, end units and interior units, have a master bedroom on the first floor. And I guess other people refer to these as age-targeted. It's a great townhome for people looking to move down to kind of a more maintenance-free living, townhouse style, from a larger single-family home when they get to the point where they no longer want to walk upstairs to their master bedroom.
We're going to mark that as A8.
So these townhomes are generally 2970 to about 3,200 square feet. So they're larger, and there's 107 of these planned in the community. So it's nearly half of the community would be master bedroom down. And the previous one, the 28-foot wide, 47 units are planned for those. So that comprises the 228. And now the clubhouse. And just I wanted to touch on the market, because what was important for us in getting involved in this property is to know it would be successful and to develop the right type of townhouse product that we think would be would fit the market for the Middletown area. And in doing so, that's why and actually by ordinance, you require 30% of the townhomes to be master bedroom down. We far exceeded that. We're about 47%. Because we think that will be a significant part of the market demand for these townhomes. And then we've designed the other two townhouse styles to be what we think would be the balance of the market demand for this project. Younger couples, in some cases, and then those kind of in between that are looking for an alternative to a single-family house, or maybe moving up, out of a very small older home or an apartment into a townhome. So we think we've got, 3 different housing styles that would be well accepted in the marketplace. Excuse me. This does look a little bit different, only because I took pieces of this and enlarged it on your sheet. But it's the same images.
Yeah.
It's the clubhouse site plan and the play equipment.
Okay. On the sheet that the board has, they have the clubhouse, color there, that area. They've got the play area. They have a light pole. Not the.
That's actually that entry detail that showed up on the cover, as well as that perspective rendering earlier in the package. So they're all the same images, but.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to say, if we ever had to go to court at some point down the road, what is it?
Yeah, the exhibit the board has 3 of the 4 images that are on what Mr. Fisher is showing. The exhibit Mr. Fisher is showing as a 4th image, which is a blow-up of the entrance sign.
So why don't we do this, just so that the record is marginally clear. We'll identify the one that the board has where it says clubhouse site plan enlarged with details. cover sheet, which has the detail of the sign, we'll mark that as A10. Everybody in the public has copies, so hopefully this isn't as confusing as it's going to sound in the transcript.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the board that you're looking at now, mounted, and I would ask that you preserve all of these because even though we're not marking them, I didn't realize it was going to be this kind of unclear. But so the board that you now have up is a combination of things that are shown on sheet A9, absent the light bulb, and A10, which is the site plan. Plus, the light bulb, but then you have photometric design on that? Was that, what else, what's that?
No, I didn't bring this over to this handout.
Right, but what is, on there, I have a solution. This is gonna get its own mark, because I'm tired of trying to describe it.
That's fine.
That's fine.
So why don't we mark this as A11? Just put A11 on there someplace, and, because it's just too complicated trying to figure out what it is.
I thought we marked this whole thing A9.
We did, we marked.
A10 was the first page, now what do you want?
Okay, here's the problem.
A11.
There are things on that, here in the weight, in the upper right and the lower left,
Yes.
that don't seem to be in your packet. See, so there's information on there, Mr. Fisher, can you point to the black and white drawings?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have the light bulb on your thing, but we don't have
But not
this isometric
And
diagram.
involved the playground equipment?
Right, we don't have this black and white, we have the image depiction.
So those are the things you're marking.
We're gonna mark that one document there as A11, just to try to be inclusive of, so that everything is in the record mark. They don't seem to be in here.
Okay,
So I know it's confusing, but
that's all right.
I
I understand.
I have one question. I noticed where you have your entrance sign. Is that a water feature?
Yes, it is.
So the water pools.
There's circulating ponds within the entry feature that provide for a drop of water through those slabs.
Okay.
So the clubhouse facility, as I mentioned before, would be about 2,400 square feet. This is just a bird's eye view of the plan for the clubhouse and the outdoor amenities, which would be like a paver patio just behind it with an outdoor lounge and fireplace. Beyond that, an outdoor pool, which has a shade structure around the one end of it. There's a play area to the west of the clubhouse, and that also has a sitting area and shade structure adjacent to it. So that would be basically the design of the clubhouse, and the other items were shown just in detail to show you a depiction of the play equipment proposed for the site, and kind of a detail of the street light, which are LED street lights that we've designed for the entire community, not just at the clubhouse, but throughout the development. There was one question in the T&M report that asked us about deliveries and garbage removal from the clubhouse. We don't propose a dumpster location here. This style and size clubhouse really doesn't demand that kind of treatment. So what we do is through the management company and the cleaning company that they use, they will, take the garbage curbside just like the townhomes, and it'll be picked up on garbage days, so that there's no need for a dumpster. Where we have larger clubhouses, that can be an issue, but for one this size, we don't envision it. And same thing for deliveries. We have adequate parking really across both fronts, or the front and the side of the clubhouse area. There's certainly parking areas for a small van to pull in for deliveries. There's not much that needs to be delivered to the clubhouse. On occasion, they'll have like small parties and things like that. Or someone may come to maintain the pool, but it's usually just a pickup truck or a box truck, and we didn't feel the need to have an official loading zone, more like a commercial facility would.
Where's your pump house located for the pool?
We have them in outdoor structures. There's two outdoor structures that show here. The pool equipment would probably be in this one, and then we'd have the other structure house the lounge chairs and some of the outdoor.
Separate from the clubhouse.
Yes. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on the maintenance of the community. A homeowners association would be formed to maintain all of the common elements in this community, including the grounds, the landscaping, the stormwater facilities. So all of the common elements within the development, including adequate reserves for the entry walls, the private streets within the community, so the clubhouse facility, and as we establish a public offering statement and a budget, for the community association, all of that is thought out up front with a list of the requirements, and all of that is disclosed, of course, to buyers when they come to purchase what is included in the association's list of responsibilities and provided for in a budget that we prepare at the start of the community, including the exterior maintenance of the town-owned buildings. So that's essentially the testimony I wanted to provide. If you want, Bill, I can just go into the 2 waiver issues that the planner raised. Okay. There was 2 things that came up as a result of your planner's report, and I don't know if you have copies there, but the first one was under what he titled site design. I think it's 1C, and it dealt with a section of your ordinance 16-632 that requires either landscaping or fencing around outdoor equipment, including HVAC or air conditioning equipment. And as we read through the requirements, the literal interpretation of those would be, in our view, pretty rigid. It requires essentially for you to pull the air conditioning unit away from the building and enclose it either with a fence or continuous landscaping that will grow up to 5 feet in height after one growing season. In our view, I think it makes it almost more obvious when you do that. Usually you want to keep the air conditioning units tucked fairly close to the foundation. We do anticipate plantings and would agree to do plantings in front of them, but I did bring a rear elevation that I can show the board that was part of the submission package. It's not in this, but if the board would like to see that, we feel that the air conditioning units can be disguised and properly screened without meeting the letter of the ordinance with 5-foot-high continuous evergreens around one 3-foot-tall air conditioning unit. So I've spoken to your planner, John, about that, and we'd be just seeking relief to have a more liberal treatment of how that would be applied.
Would there be any function if someone who owns a townhouse wants to put an emergency generator in? Are there any legal things that you have to do to provide for that, or where it can be placed?
That's a good question. We've never encountered that in any of our town communities that I know of, where owners want to add a generator.
In today's area, in Middletown, lights go out all the time, and the amount of power generators, it may be a source. Not a problem, but you may consider that in the future.
Yeah, and we could put language in our association documents to, either strictly limit it. There are actually interior units, believe it or not. You can put generators inside, but they'd have to be in a basement, of course.
Fisher, it's not confused with the homeowner association documents provide that if a homeowner was going to put in an emergency generator outside, that would dictate both the location and that it would be screened?
Screened and buffered in terms of noise, so that the baffle for the noise would be, I think, of most concern to us.
Noise, and also where the gas flows to the, usually they try to place them as close to where the gas enters the dwelling.
Right.
I'd be surprised if any homeowners association allow things like that. Also, you made a comment about the ordinance. So you're saying that you don't want to follow the ordinance in terms of what you want to put around the air conditioning?
Yeah. I mean, a strict interpretation of that, I think, is overkill. I think it's going to make the air conditioning units more obvious than less obvious, and I think it'll pull them further away from the townhouse building and require an unusual amount of vegetation or fencing where fencing really isn't necessary. So that's what you talk to your planner about. And since these are all internal to the project, I mean, everyone's going to have the same treatment with their air conditioning unit. And so it's not like we're screening them from adjoiners, because there really are, with the exception of a few homes at the end of Seagull Lane, which would be adequately buffered from the development. There's really no adjoining properties that would even see this.
But you are proposing to screen them, it's just not the 5-foot capacity part.
That's correct. Should I go on to the next one?
Yes.
The other one was RV parking. You have a kind of an old requirement in your ordinance, and that's, I think, 4D in the planner's report, that points out 16-627N, as in Nancy 9 of your ordinance, requires a provision for recreational vehicle parking in developments like this. And we would be seeking a waiver from that. We don't see any need or demand for it. We've never had buyers in townhome communities similar to this ask for, areas where they could park their RV. I think it's really something that used to be more prevalent many years ago in some of the adult communities, but not so much in a community like this. So we would like to provide restrictive language in the association documents that would prohibit RV vehicles from being parked in driveways and on the streets. We can't park on the streets except in designated parking. And since the residential site improvement standards do not provide for provisions for RV parking, we think it's a reasonable request.
Do you want to discuss the unrestricted rear yard requirement?
Yeah, this I don't know that it really needs a waiver, but it's something that we saw in the planner's report that deals with adequate yard areas when you're adjacent to environmental constraints. And there are 3 locations on our plan where the buffer from the wetlands comes very close to the rear of like 3 townhome buildings. But in accordance with the DEP requirements, we're allowed to modify the width of the buffer. It's called a transition area averaging plan. So in doing that, and we plan to do that in these 3 locations, we would pull the buffer away from the backs of those 3 townhome buildings, and we would expand the buffer somewhere else. You have to compensate for what you reduce. And that plan gets recorded, and there's a restriction on the property. And in doing that, we will have adequate areas behind all of our townhomes. Those were there's 3 spots on the plan where the buffer got a little close to 3 buildings. But with the averaging plan, we would have a minimum of 25 feet behind those buildings. And once that's approved and recorded, then I think we've met this requirement. So I don't know that we need a waiver because that's our plan, but we wanted to raise it just in case there was a concern.
I have no further questions, Mr. Fisher.
Anyone from the board? Good.
Our next witness is John Ray, who's our traffic engineer.
I do. John Ray, REA, principal with McDonough and Ray Associates, 1431 Lakewood Road, Manasquan, New Jersey.
Okay. We need to qualify Mr. Ray. I know he's appeared before this.
Thank you.
Just go to the record, your PE and statement.
Licensed professional engineer, my specialty is traffic engineering.
Mr. Ray, do you want to describe the studies you've done for property, and first describe the overall layout of the studies you've done?
We did do a full and fully detailed traffic impact study for the project. The board is in receipt of it. It is dated November 6, 2014. And essentially, we'll go over some details. I know Mr. Fisher has started. Just to outline where the property is again. It is basically located in the southwest quadrant of the intersection of West Front Street and Middletown Lincroft Road.
Just for the record, Mr. Ray.
A1, A1, the overall aerial photograph of the site. We currently have access, the property currently has access to both Middletown Lincroft Road and to West Front Street via 2 unsignalized T intersections. We will maintain those access points The access to Middletown Lincroft Road, as Mr. Fisher has shown you on some of the boards that he presented, will be upgraded. It will look nice, but essentially it will function as an unsignalized T-intersection with 2 approach lanes coming out to Middletown Lincroft Road, one for left turns, one for right turns. Both of the access points that we currently have do have left turn lanes to enter the property from northbound Middletown Lincroft Road and also from westbound West Front Street. Those left turn lanes will be maintained. They will be restriped. All of the striping in the vicinity of the 2 intersections that we will use for access will be redone. In terms of updated traffic counts, what I've done is we've collected peak hour traffic counts at the intersections of Newman Springs Road and Middletown Lincroft Road, Swimming River Road, as well as Middletown Lincroft Road and West Front Street. The peak hour traffic counts were done in the fall of 2014 over a period of 4 separate days. Days when schools were open, weather conditions were appropriate, there were no detours, no construction in the area, in order to maintain good level, a good level of assurance that the traffic counts that we conducted would be representative of normal or routine peak hour levels. We also installed automatic traffic recorders across Middletown Lincroft Road and West Front Street in the vicinity of the access points. The road tubes, if you will, recorded a week's worth of traffic volume data for both of those roads. I'll give you some numbers. Middletown Lincroft Road is currently handling approximately 12,925 vehicles during an average weekday. Saturday volumes are a little bit lower, about 8,200 vehicles per day on a Saturday. Sunday volumes are even a little bit lower than that. West Front Street is handling approximately 6,550 vehicles per day on a typical weekday. Again, Saturday volumes are a little bit lower, approximately 4,200 vehicles on a Saturday. So what we learned from doing the traffic counts was, I was here approximately 4 or 5 years ago for the original application, and what I learned from looking at the traffic counts that are now 5 years after I originally did the counts for the first application is that the background traffic growth that the DOT has suggested based on their historical background traffic growth rate data for the area of 1% per year is basically holding true. The increase in traffic from the counts that I conducted back in 2010 has reflected approximately a 1% per year increase in traffic, both on Middletown Lincroft Road and West Front Street. Now that I've done the existing traffic counts, established the base for the traffic study, we went back to the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual to generate traffic for the development. I'll go over some of those numbers for the morning and afternoon peak hours. We're currently proposing 228 townhomes, and for the morning peak hour, we are anticipating approximately 100 driveway movements onto and off the property, and for the PM peak hour, 119 traffic movements onto and off the property. Now again, this is only during that one concentrated peak hour on Middletown Lincroft Road and West Front Street. There will be more traffic generated from the community over a 4 or 5 hour window in the morning and in the afternoon, but during that critical peak hour, when we measure the traffic impact from the community, those numbers from the Institute of Transportation Engineers have been found to be very accurate for communities throughout New Jersey, throughout the United States, and the numbers are accepted by the Monmouth County Engineering Department, NJDOT, and I believe the numbers are pretty accurate. Comparing the trip generation for the current proposal to what was previously proposed, and also to the 350,000 square foot office building that is currently on the site, I'll just go through those numbers quickly. Again, this proposal will generate 100 peak hour movements during the morning peak hour. The previous 342 unit proposal would have generated 158 traffic movements onto and off the property, and the 350,000 square foot office building, 565 traffic movements. For the afternoon peak hour, the current proposal is 119 peak hour trips as compared to 197 for the 342 unit proposal and 542 for the office building. We then took our traffic generation estimates, we distributed those vehicles to the 2 access points. and to the adjacent roadway network based on existing commuter patterns. Everybody's pretty familiar with the commuter patterns in the area. The primary commuter pattern during the morning is to get north on the Parkway. Secondarily, some traffic heads to the east towards Red Bank, toward the Garden State Parkway South, and towards the west toward Freehold on West Front Street. So we distributed our traffic volumes consistent with the existing commuter patterns. We then looked out to a horizon year of 2020. We assumed the 2020 design year for the project when it would be fully built out and all 228 homes would be occupied and generating traffic. In order to project 2020 traffic volumes, in addition to the existing volumes and the traffic that we're going to generate, we went back to the NJDOT's background traffic growth rate data for the area. We included 6 years worth of traffic growth. Counts were actually taken in 2014, late 2014. So I included 6 years worth of background traffic growth from the NJDOT's historical data. And I also obtained the traffic study for the Bam Hollow Estates project, which is 190 single-family homes on the Bam Hollow Country Club. I took that traffic and added that into the mix for the design year of 2020 as well. And then what I did was what you have to do when you do a traffic impact study, because you are measuring the impact of the development proposal on traffic conditions. I took a look at design year 2020 no-build traffic volumes with the background traffic growth, traffic from Bam Hollow, all of that included in the no-build situation, but without our traffic. And then I added our traffic in to do a 2020 build analysis. We talk about the site access points first, and then I'll go into the off-site intersections. We have 2 site access points, as I've indicated, one to Middletown Lincroft Road and one to West Front Street. The morning peak hour for the Middletown Lincroft Road site access, our exiting movements out of the Middletown Lincroft Road will operate at a level of service. I want to make sure I get this right. It's a C and a D. I think it's a D during the morning. No, it's a C during the morning and a level of service D during the afternoon peak hour. At the West Front...
What is the peak hours?
Peak hours, yeah, based on the traffic counts we did, they basically, the highest peak hour in the morning is typically 7 to 8 in the morning, and in the afternoon 5 to 6, based on the ATR data.
Is that based on people going to work?
Primarily people going to work. There is some other traffic involved. There are people dropping kids off at Oak Hill and things of that nature.
Is you have, without doing it, the immediate count, there's got to be 6 schools within a mile of here. That is what contributes tremendously to the traffic. I would have thought the peak hour of traffic
8 to 9
was exactly.
I live over there.
I live close also, so.
Well, what I did was, let me back up for.
Okay.
I said generally, it said looking at the counts that we reported, generally 7 to 8 is a little bit higher than 8 to 9, but rest assured that when I did the analysis, I took the highest peak hour for each one of the 2 intersections that we counted and balanced the traffic volumes using the highest peak hour. So, if anything, I did an overly conservative analysis.
But the number of kids in those, schools
I've seen it, yes.
would disqualify that statement. It just doesn't add up. The number of kids in the high school, the number of kids that are in Thompson, not Swamp, got Lincroft over here, that's just amazing.
The road dudes.
You got CBA.
Yeah,
I understand, but again, I was trying to...
You have that data?
Yes, I do. It's right in the report. You have it in front of you.
Where is?
It's in the appendix.
Is it this one?
It's in the appendix to the traffic study. And if you go look at the automatic traffic count data, 7 to 8 generally is a little bit higher than 8 to 9, but what I want to make very clear is that all of the analysis that I've done is based on the highest peak hour traffic count that we conducted at both of those 2 off-site intersections. So if at one location 7:30 to 8:30 was a little bit higher, that's what I utilized.
Show me where on the map where you have those the ATRs here.
Right in the vicinity of the site access on Middletown Lincroft Road and on West Front Street. Actually, it's over here, right by the site access points. The numbers, you have the numbers, you know. Ask me any questions you want about them, but the numbers are accurate. And the school traffic, the point I want to make is the school traffic is all included in the analysis. It's all there. I went through the intersection this morning about 7:45 to 8 o'clock, and I noticed probably because of Brookdale, the northbound left turn lane on Swimming River Road was backed up, and it took people 2-3 cycles to get through. I think it's primarily because of the Brookdale traffic. I came back through the intersection at 8:15, and there was no one in the left turn lane. So, I understand the contribution that the schools make to traffic flow in the area.
Mr. Ray, to reiterate, when you did your analysis, first of all, the analysis was at the intersections of the project.
Correct.
You know exactly how much traffic was
Exactly,
going
yes.
by those intersections. And then, secondly, what you actually used was you looked at the actual counts and identified for each intersection what the peak hour
I
was
did.
at that point.
And then I balanced the traffic volumes using the highest peak hour at either of the two intersections. You can do the math yourself. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I know that what I did is following proper protocol, and I'm trying to answer the questions.
You're testifying to the traffic at the intersections of your exit and entrance area.
Right.
Not, for instance, the West Front Street, Middletown, and Crawford Road.
I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it.
No, I'm just so, that's okay. I'm sure you're going to get there. Just so it's clear here to the board, what you're doing right, or have been doing at this point, is only the entrance and exit
Correct.
of this facility.
Let me go back. I pulled the manual turning movement counts out of the appendix. I want to go over some data. At the intersection of Newman Springs Road and Swimming River Road, Middletown, Lincroft Road, the actual peak hour occurs between 7:15 and 8:15. That's the peak hour in the morning.
I mean, there's a large appendix, and they're not, the sheets aren't numbered, so if you're going to go through those numbers, can you direct the board to the sheet, you know, so that...
Well, there is no sheet number, Mr. Gorman. It's in the appendix.
What do you need to?
I'll go into as much detail as you want.
No, we do it September 21st.
I can't answer your questions. Okay, I'm sorry.
September 21st, because I see September 24th on here, it's a Wednesday, so I'm assuming it's that week.
Well, let me go back. You have to look at everything. Let me give you the exact dates that the counts were done. Manual turning movement counts were done at Middletown, Lincroft Road, Newman Springs Road. The AM peak hour was counted on Wednesday, September 24th. The PM peak hour, Thursday, October 2nd. At West Front Street and Middletown, Lincroft Road, the morning peak hour count was done on Wednesday, October 1st. The afternoon peak hour count was Tuesday, September 30th. The ATR counts, the automatic traffic counters, were out on those two roads from Monday, September 29th through Sunday, October 5th.
We just have to get, if it's going to be part of the record, we just have to, they have to be able to hear it. I mean,
So
our microphones are pretty sensitive, so that type of lower level gets picked up by the mics, but it's not getting picked up.
So let me just go back. In looking at the raw traffic count data, the actual peak hour down at Middletown, Lincroft Road, and Newman Springs Road was 7:15 to 8:15. And I know Oak Hill starts at 8:12, so we probably captured a lot of that traffic. We captured the Brookdale traffic. That's all part of the analysis. The school traffic is in there is the point I'm trying to make. So getting back to the levels of service for our site access roadways, the Middletown Lincroft Road access will operate at a C level of service for the morning peak hour and a D for the afternoon peak hour. Remember, in terms of levels of service, anything level of service E or better is considered to be acceptable, and so those are acceptable levels of service. At the West Front Street access, we will have a B level of service for the morning peak hour and a C for the afternoon peak hour. Level of service is a little bit better, and the delay is a little bit less up there because West Front Street is carrying approximately half the traffic volume of Middletown Lincroft Road. So the most important thing I needed to come to as far as a conclusion is our site access points to Middletown Lincroft Road and to West Front Street will operate safely, efficiently, and well within accepted traffic engineering parameters.
Can I just clarify?
Sure.
You talked about the level of services that upon completion of your project?
Yes.
Earlier you started talking about the future level of service.
Well, I'm going to talk about the bad things now. So our driveway is going to operate at good levels of service. Now we're going to talk about, the off-site intersection at Newman Springs Road, Middletown Lincroft Road, and Swimming River Road, which I referred to, earlier when I went through this morning. I saw the impact of the Brookdale traffic. That intersection for the 2020 design year will operate at level of service F for the morning peak hour for both the no-build condition without us and the build condition with us. For the afternoon peak hour, it will operate at level of service E, and that's both for the no-build without us and for the build condition with us. The actual impact of our project on that intersection, in terms of the percent impact, how much traffic we're adding to the intersection, we're adding approximately 1.1% more traffic to the intersection during the morning and afternoon peak hours. Now up at West Front Street and Middletown Lincroft Road, because there's a little bit lower volume going through there, that intersection, we're adding a little bit more of a percent impact. It's 1.8% during the morning peak hour and 2.2% during the afternoon peak hour. And the level of service at West Front Street and Middletown Lincroft Road will be a C during the morning peak hour and an E during the afternoon peak hour.
Did your analysis take into consideration on the other side of West Front Street, you've got whole areas there that are being detoured away? Because that road has had its own construction going on?
There was no construction going on when we did our traffic counts. There was none. Believe me.
On the other side of West Front, because I live over there, so I don't know what's going on over there.
Okay.
I go to the bus stop sometimes,
Okay.
taking the train. So if you go down that road over there, it's been detoured, it's been shut.
You have to be a little more specific about going
West
to
Front,
that
the
road.
other side of West Front, so on the other
Over
side
here?
of Middletown Road to the right, that whole area there to the right.
Yeah, okay.
It's been detoured away from your intersection.
Well, because of the Hubbard's Bridge construction, yeah, but the counts were done before the construction of the bridge started. You have to understand that. Okay, well, tell me, give me a description of what the detour was and maybe I can help you.
I don't know, I'm not.
I know that.
I don't work for the people, I'm just telling you that, it's been detoured and people have been pushed away instead of coming back through your intersections there.
I can't respond to pushed away. I know that the days that we did our
You were
counts.
out there looking, right?
Yeah, the
You saw
days-
there was construction going on.
I didn't see any construction over on that side of West Front Street that would have impacted the traffic volumes using the intersection. And to give you an example again of how I double and triple checked everything, I went back, I looked at the intersection volumes using West Front Street and Middletown Lincroft Road in 2014, compared them to the counts I took in 2010, and they were about 4% higher, right in line with what the DOT expected. So you have some very capable professionals reviewing my reports. I didn't see any comments in their review letters about counts not being done on the right day or whatever. I'll leave that up to Mr. Cady. But, I'll spend as much time on this as you would like, but I know from my experience, the days that I did the counts were representative of normal representative peak hour conditions. There were no detours, no accidents, no weather conditions on those days that would have impacted routine or normal traffic flow. We're very careful about doing this. That's all I can tell you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Once you have a build out to 2020, also with the Mountain Hollow, which should be built out at that time.
Yes.
By 2020, will the levels will rise? Do you have an approximate what the level will rise? I don't know
Yeah.
if this is a generic.
Yes. Yes, I do.
And I'm wondering, and I'm saying this because more than likely, we need more check.
You can't be talking at the same time as the car's talking.
Would you also have, if you're, would the town or the state have to possibly put traffic lights in other areas?
Well,
because of the more trip generation?
the answer is, yeah, let me try to answer the questions, not necessarily in the order that they were posed. Monmouth County is looking at the corridor, the Route 520 corridor throughout the Lincroft area. They've been looking at it for a while now. I know the county and the town may not be on the same page as far as what everybody wants, but they've got my traffic study. I sent copies of the traffic study to them. They're reviewing it. It is my understanding, based on a conversation I had with the county engineering department last week, that they've farmed the analysis out to a consultant, and now they've got a consultant looking at the corridor in terms of improvements to the traffic signals, driveways, things of that nature. I don't know what they're going to come up with, but they've got my traffic study. They know that the intersection of Newman Springs Road and Middletown Lincroft Road is a congested intersection. They're going to do what they can do to fix the intersection in terms of the level of service. It'll probably wind up being more in terms of traffic signal timing and phasing adjustments. I don't think the town or the county has an appetite for acquiring a lot of property on
Monmouth
the
County Planning Board is looking into it. I think that's a big document. I know they've been trying for the last 5, 6 years.
I know.
Okay.
So the county is looking at it, they've got my report, they've got the projected traffic volumes. I'm assuming that they're going to give this to their consultant, and ultimately, at some point in time, Monmouth County is going to come out with a series of recommendations for improving traffic conditions along the 520 corridor in Lincroft. Exactly what they're going to be and when they're going to come out with those recommendations, I don't know.
How about the other end, West Front Street? I mean, they're not studying that.
They didn't give me an indication that they were studying that intersection, but they do have the volumes, they do have the information, whether they will use it to optimize the traffic signal timing and phasing. The signal equipment up at West Front Street and Middletown Lincroft Road, as you probably know, it's a basic 2-phase traffic signal operation, and the equipment looks like it's a little aged, I guess would be the best way to put it, but I don't know what plans the county may have for that intersection.
What about working with the county to try and suggest some timing adjustments and upgrades? Because I understand they're not increasing percentage-wise dramatically, but depending on the movement, we basically failed at both intersections.
Well, I was here 4 years ago. I recommended some traffic signal timing adjustments. Nobody listened to me. We denied the application. I went away for 4 years. I came back this time. I gave the county all of my volumes, the projections. I didn't make any specific traffic signal timing adjustment recommendations. I can do so if you would like.
I think going back.
Yeah. I'll do it again.
Or I think we should get there again.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't have a problem doing that. Ultimately, this is not under our control. It's the county's decision. But
And that's exactly why
We have to sweep the wheel, as they say.
and I think it makes sense to sit down with, Mr. Cady or someone from his office, along with Mr.
I would
Ray.
be more than happy to sit down with Mr. Cady's traffic engineering department. We'll look at some traffic signal timing adjustments that can be made. We'll make some recommendations with the understanding that the recommendations will go to the county, and the county ultimately has the control over everything.
Just a point of clarification. Obviously, Newman Springs Road is a county road. Is West Front Street as well in that?
I don't believe it is, no. I think that's...
What about Middletown?
Middletown Lincroft Road.
Road.
Yes,
So both intersections are under county jurisdiction?
that is correct. Both intersections are under county jurisdiction. The access to Middletown Lincroft Road is under county jurisdiction as well, but West Front Street is the township.
So when you go to the county, you need approval for they're going to look at the traffic impacts on both those intersections as well as your in and out on Middletown Lincroft Road?
That would be the limit of their jurisdiction, the two off-site intersections and our access to Middletown Lincroft Road. That is correct.
But not the in and out on West Front?
That is correct. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Papa, our site engineer, has been in touch with the county, and I think they've already asked us to redo the striping on Middletown Lincroft Road. At our access point.
That was part of the county.
Yeah, that's one of the things the county's asked us to do. And they may ask us to do more before the application is eventually approved. So again, to go back to the traffic impact, yes, it's 228 townhouses. It's going to generate traffic. It's going to generate peak hour traffic. I've analyzed what that impact's going to be. I've done everything in accordance with proper traffic engineering principles. The report is in the hands of the county, in the hands of your professionals. And I stand willing to meet with your professionals if there's anything we can do to make recommendations with respect to optimizing the traffic signal timing, things of that nature. I also need to talk about a few more things that were in the professionals' reports, if I have a few minutes. The Turnberry Drive, Leedsville Drive connection, and I'm going to show you that right here. Turnberry Drive and Leedsville Drive go down to Hurley Lane and come out to a signalized intersection down by St. Leo's. It goes through a residential neighborhood. This was a large issue at the last series of meetings. What I did in order to address that again was I went back, did some additional traffic counts at the intersection of Turnberry and Middletown Lincroft Road. And what I found was that the volumes of traffic that are using that residential collector system, if you will, are essentially what they were, a couple of years ago. We have about 190 vehicles traveling on Turnberry Drive in two directions during the afternoon peak hour. I also went out and did a Saturday count because I know Saturday was a concern. Volumes are a little bit lower on Saturday, about 115 vehicles in two directions on Turnberry Drive during the Saturday peak hour. It's the middle of the day on Saturday when people are out doing their chores, going shopping, doing things of that nature. And the reason why I did those traffic counts was I wanted to, again, establish for the record and for, as a fact, that those roads are what we classify as residential collectors. They collect traffic from that neighborhood that is east of Middletown Lincroft Road, north of Newman Springs, and south of West Front Street, this big neighborhood in here. Those roadways collect traffic from that neighborhood and distribute that traffic to the higher order roadways, such as Middletown Lincroft Road, Newman Springs Road, and West Front Street. They are collector roadways, and as such, they carry higher traffic volumes than a normal, typical residential street. Now, I do think our project is going to have an impact on those streets. We're going to add some traffic to those streets. I know at the last series of meetings there was a lot of discussion about everybody was going to use those streets to avoid the intersection of Middletown Lincroft Road and Newman Springs Road. Well, some people may elect to do that. However, the one thing I would point out is that in order to do that, traffic would have to come out of our driveway in Middletown Lincroft Road and make a left turn in order to get up to Turnberry, come through the neighborhood. The left turn, of course, is a little bit more difficult to make than the right turn, to go right down to Newman Springs. There's additional delay associated with the left turn, probably an additional 20, 30 seconds over making a right turn. And so I don't really think during peak hours a lot of our traffic is going to use that residential roadway network in order to avoid what's going on down at the intersection. They're going to have to make a more difficult left turn to get up to Turnberry. Then they're on a 25-mile-an-hour residential street. I'm sure the police enforce the speed limit every now and then. I don't think they're going to get down to the intersection at Newman Springs and Hurley any quicker by doing that.
That's not the intersection they're going to go to. They're going to come down Leedsville, make a left on Westwood, I believe it is.
Okay.
Come out on Hilltop Circle and make the left out of there.
They may do that, Mr. Davis.
It's a route idea.
Yeah, they may do that. And
it's that simple because you never want to go to the Hurley Lane intersection because the lights are just stupid. So
that's the county. That's not me.
No, I know it's not you.
I know. But to make a long story short, I do expect some of our traffic is going to use that street network, particularly if they're going to St. Leo's, if they're going to the Acme, if they're going to any of the stores on Newman Springs Road. Yes, some of our traffic is going to use those streets. But again, they are designed to accommodate that kind of traffic. They are collector streets. And that's what their design and their purpose is. So I agree some of that will happen. I want to just go briefly over go over some numbers on the site plan, which Mr. Papa will go over in more detail. The residential site improvement standards have certain parking requirements that we must adhere to. I went over the numbers, and I think in Mr. Katie's report, I think he is correct in that he calculated the parking for the two-car garage and the two-car driveway combination as 3 parking spaces because our driveway width is 18 feet instead of 20, and so we can't count it as 3.5 spaces, we have to count it as 3 spaces, and I agree with him. And what that essentially means is that The overall RSIS parking requirement for the 228 three-bedroom townhomes is 559 spaces, and we have 684, so we exceeded substantially. Included in the overall requirement is a requirement of 0.5 off-street parking spaces per unit for visitor parking. We have 228 units, so 114 off-street spaces would be required within that number. Not in addition to it, but within that overall number. And if I'm not mistaken, Ray, we have 136. So we exceed that number as well. So the parking that we've provided for the community meets and exceeds the residential side improvement standards.
One related question, will parallel parking be permitted on internal
No.
streets? And will signs be posted to indicate
Yes.
parking?
The internal roadways are 24 feet wide. Parking is not going to be permitted on either side of those roadways. They're going to be for access and circulation only. We will be providing more than adequate off-street parking spaces for visitors off of those 24-foot wide roadways.
Will you have safety areas for school bus pickup?
Safety areas, the school buses are generally, if they're in the community, they'll probably stop, put the lights on, and just, use the 24-foot wide access roadways to pick the kids up. Just like they do on the residential streets throughout town. And so that basically summarizes it. I'm back here 5 years later. I'm just as unpopular now as I was then. I understand that, but the facts are the facts. And I don't know what else I can say.
Okay, just a couple of questions. There was a reference in memos from the board professionals as to the crosswalk that is by Oak Hill Academy and potential of having flashing lights there. Would you like to comment on that?
And that's under the jurisdiction of the county. I think the thought process was there is a crosswalk, if Mr. Fisher can put this up at the intersection.
I think this is A6. You mark something?
If I could, Ray, just make sure we're looking at the right.
It's at A5.
Okay.
There is a crosswalk just north of the Turnberry Drive intersection. I'm pointing to it right here with my pointer. And the thought process was to add some flashing lights, flashing beacons, as is permitted by the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices at the crosswalk in order to alert people on Middletown and Lincroft Road of the fact that the crosswalk is there. And extra caution needs to be exercised. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we've agreed to either do that or participate in that if the county will approve the request.
Also at that location, there aren't any ADA ramps. They have this full-face curb.
Okay. So it would have to be brought up to full, ADA requirements in addition to the flashing warning beacons. One more thing I wanted to...
Existing crosswalk or not?
It's existing.
Existing.
Yes. And we would just supplement the existing crosswalk with flashing lights and with the ADA compliant ramps. One more thing I want to discuss. Okay.
What was the purpose of upgrading that crosswalk, which I've never seen anyone use?
The prior application, there's a lot of discussion about the crossing of those down.
Right.
And discussion about the location. During this application, we realized that there was an existing crosswalk here. It wasn't up to code, but it made sense because it's not far from the site it exists. It's at an intersection, roughly, so it's not a mid-block crossing. It's also at the school, so whether it's used or not, it makes sense to upgrade that.
But as I recall, because I raised the issue in the previous application, was people trying to get from this site to Lincroft, the Lincroft School, et cetera, the only place there's sidewalk on Middletown Lincroft Road is on the other side of the street. And what I was saying at the time was, no kid is going to go from the entrance of this facility up to Oak Hill Academy, cross at that point, and then come all the way back to Leapfrog. It's not going to happen. They're going to be trying to get across right there at the entrance, and that was why the question was that I raised was, could there be, in effect, a crosswalk down here? And I understand you got to fight with the county and God knows who else here, but that's, nobody's going from this development up to that crosswalk to get into Lincoln.
Yeah, what I can tell you is the county is generally not in favor of mid-block crossings, so.
Right.
You know, it could be that the attempt be made at the driveway location, and if the county doesn't permit it, to allow to
To
upgrade
move it up to the other.
Just trying to kind of, knowing the county's, the way they review matters.
Oh, no, I agree. It was the same.
Right.
The conclusion of the discussion the last time was basically that same thing. So that's why I was asking, did we find something new here? No. Okay.
With the amount of traffic in that area, though, it would behoove us to do that. I mean, I see it done in Metuchen, in a lot of Middlesex, a number of towns, and it really stops the traffic.
Well, the flashing
The flashing
lights.
orange lights,
Okay.
absolutely. I know they embed in the streets, so they have one on the side.
Okay.
That actually works, and it would behoove us to at least try to get that in.
You got to do something to get the motorists' attention. I agree.
That would, yeah.
One additional thing I wanted to mention, because I think it was in both the planner's report and Mr. Katie's report, is the Oak Hill Academy. I did go back out and take a look at their drop-off and pickup procedures. They are located just to the north of us. They have two drop-off areas and pickup areas along Middletown Lincroft Road. The drop-off essentially occurs for about a 15-minute period prior to the 8-12 start of kindergarten through 8th grade. I think pre-K starts a little bit later. But the bulk of the activity occurs from about 10 minutes to 8 till about 8:10. Parents dropping off the children and coming back down Middletown Lincroft Road. And by the way, I did notice a lot of those parents do turn onto Turnberry. So I'm sure the residents know that they use Turnberry.
Yes, they do.
I've seen a lot of parents come out.
Make the illegal left turn.
I've seen a lot of SUVs making a left turn onto Turnberry from Middletown Lincroft Road after they come out of Oak Hill. I did notice that.
Mr. Diaz just spoke to the headmaster just last week, 2 weeks ago.
He's sitting in the audience and he
Okay.
write a letter to those people.
So, for what it's worth, that activity is occurring, and they're part of those 190 vehicles that I talked about. The one thing I did want to discuss was the separation from our access to Middletown Lincroft Road to the nearest driveway for the Oak Hill Academy. We have about 600 feet, because one of the comments was, again, what kind of an impact are we going to have on the Oak Hill operation? And quite frankly, we're 600 feet away from their nearest driveway, and it's going to be a pretty minimal impact. There's going to be additional traffic on Middletown Lincroft Road generated by our community, but we're 600 feet away from their driveway, and I think the impact will be minimal.
That 600 feet, by the way, is why I'm saying kids are not going to
Understood.
go all the way up there. And because coming back, it's another 600 feet.
And Mr. Davis, as Mr. Katie said, the county doesn't want to do, once you establish a crosswalk at a mid-block location, if something goes wrong, the county doesn't want to have anything to do with that. But I will say this, if Mr. Katie wants to assist me in going to the county and asking for that, we can probably make the case that striping a crosswalk at our driveway over to the east side of Middletown Lincroft Road, it's not really a mid-block location because this is an intersection. It's a driveway. So we might be able to make the case to the county, and I'm willing to do that, especially if I have Mr. Katie's support, if the board would like that.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
But that is option one, and the fallback would be the current.
Right.
I have no further questions for Mr. Ray.
Anyone else from the board? Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
Mr. Papa.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
excuse me for one moment. With regard to the two witnesses that obviously you're looking to ask a couple of questions at the end per witness.
Correct.
Since this may be a topic that there are more public here than not, would it behoove us to have a public ask questions of this witness at this time and the previous witness only? So the testimony is fresh.
That's a good idea.
It's up to the board. I mean, I think the next two witnesses will be relatively quick, but if you want to proceed, that's however you want to proceed, it's fine with us.
When you say quick,
I think between them, we're probably looking at a half-hour testimony, total.
okay, because it was in your request that we're holding it till the end, or,
And
so the witnesses will come. All right, let's continue here this way.
I'm going to take questions, or I'm going to come back? Okay.
One more question for clarification.
Yes.
As far as the flashing BB, if we are to go to the county with a request for the crosswalk at the driveway, should the flashing BB be at that location?
Yes. Yes.
I don't think so.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, bring your next to another half hour.
Mr. Papa?
If you could raise your right hand, please. Swear testimony about to give the board's truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I did.
And your full name and business address, please.
Raymond Papa, P-A-P-A. I work at Najeri and Associates, where I've worked for the past 30 years. I've had a professional engineer's license since 1988 and a degree in civil engineering. For the last 30 years, I've been mainly doing residential site plan development. I've appeared in front of many boards in Monmouth County and the rest of the state.
This board is at.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Papa, you want to start off by describing the existing site conditions?
I have a display called existing features of it.
That's A2 for the record.
A2, yes.
The total site is 67.98 acres. It meets the town standard for minimum lot size. We have approximately 160 feet of frontage on Front Street, and approximately 860 feet of frontage on Middletown Lincroft Road, which meets the town's requirement. As discussed before, we have submitted our plans to Monmouth County for review, and aside from minor landscaping comments, they asked us to restripe the roadway, and we've agreed to do that. You've heard the testimony about the crosswalks. The site is currently 25% impervious. That includes building, parking areas, roadways. My client Torcon will be demolishing the site before K-Hovnanian takes over. All roadways will be removed, buildings will be removed. We're not reusing any existing utilities, so stormwater pipe, water pipe will be taken out of the ground. All new utilities will be put back in. There is a JCP&L transformer along Middletown Lincroft Road. We've had contact with JCP&L. When the demolition plan is done, the transformer will be taken down and the easement will be vacated. And after we receive site plan approval, they will do a design to bring service into the site.
That transformer is to serve the existing office building?
That transformer serves the existing office building, yes. Along the southern edge of the site, there's tributaries to Gut Swamp Brook. There's also a stream that runs north to south. You'll see comments in the Environmental Commission letter as to what is a state open water, what is a stream, where are wetlands. We've applied for a letter of interpretation from the DEP and received it. That establishes what's a wetland, what your buffers are. We have 50 feet buffers. That determines what's a state open water. In addition to that, we got a flood hazard verification. That determines what's a stream, what's your riparian buffer. We have 150-foot riparian buffers on this site. And they determine where the streams are, where the flood hazard area is, a 100-year floodplain. So we have those two approvals from the state, and that pretty much determines what is a stream, what is a state open water. We'll be applying for several more DEP permits. A GP11 for discharging stormwater to the stream, a GP10 for sidewalk, a GP1
to move the detention basins. And I believe it's a GP 14 for building the walking trails. I'm going to put another display up.
Before you begin, let's just make sure that we know which that map you're looking at. That's A5.
Enlarged site plan.
A5.
Mr. Buck, based on those site constraints identified by DEP, did you then design the layout of the proposed development?
That's correct.
You want to describe that layout of the development?
The wetlands and the stream are along the southern edge and north to south, and we will have our riparian buffers and wetland buffers. As discussed earlier, when we did a critical area map, we just showed standard 50-foot buffers, and in some cases they came close to the building. But during the DEP approval process, we'll apply for a transition area waiver, which is a buffering plan, which allows us to reduce the buffers in some areas, expand it in others. We will not have a critical area or a wetland buffer within 25 feet of any house. Our site plan shows an access off Middletown Lincroft Road, which was described by Mr. Ray, and another one that goes out to West Front Street. Our roadway system is considered residential access. That's 24-foot cartways with perpendicular parking. Mr. Ray discussed the parking numbers, but in addition to his numbers, the rec building would require 12 additional spaces under the town's definition of a community center. So with the visitor parking and those 12 spaces, I'd be required to have 126 surface parking spaces. This plan has 136, so we exceed that number by 10.
And that's in addition to the spaces for the residential units?
Correct. The roadway system for roadway curves, curb returns at the intersections all meets RSIS. Engineer's review letter requested some minor adjustments to roadway curves, and we agreed to do that. We also stated previously that we will sign for no parallel parking along the 24-foot cartways. There will be a clean water system. The water system will start at Middletown Lincroft Road, go out to West Front Street. That meets RSIS requirements. That will be required to be in by the time there are 50 COs on site. So that looping system would be required. Sanitary sewer system all collects to the southwest and will connect into a trunk line that runs along the stream. So we won't be breaking into Middletown Lincroft Road for a sewer connection. There will be a water connection on Middletown Lincroft Road, and we're going to restore the road per township specifications. As far as the types of buildings we're putting on site, there's a requirement, I believe, 30% master downs, which is the 32-foot wide home. We have 107 homes, that's 47% of the master downs. Along the roadways, we have sidewalk on both sides. That'll be a 4-foot sidewalk. In some areas, mainly across the parking aisles, we're abutting the curb, and in those areas we'll have 6-foot sidewalks. The proposed site will have 18.9 acres of impervious cover. That's 27.8%, where we're allowed 40. Just for comparison, the original application had 22.5 acres of impervious. So we've reduced the impervious cover from the original application by 3.6 acres. And in addition, over the existing condition, we've increased by 2.2 acres. The density requirement is 3.5 units per acre. We have 3.35. Town setbacks are 250 feet from the collector road, 75 feet from the remaining perimeter, and we meet those setback requirements. The building coverage requirement is 35% max. We have 13.7% building coverage. Our stormwater system consists of 2 wet detention basins along Middletown Lake Cross Road. Our entire site is 68.9 acres. In addition to that, we're taking over 47 acres across our site from the properties to the north. Most of it we will route through our detention basins. Some of it will be passed directly through. We are collecting from the Oak Hill detention basin. We're connecting to that pipe. There is a pipe at the end of Seagull Lane that discharges onto the property. We're connecting both of those pipes to our detention basin. The detention basin will discharge from the northern one to the southern one into the existing and then into the stream. We have 2 other locations where we're discharging directly to the stream. You'll see comments in the environmental review as well as the engineer's review questioning whether we can discharge stormwater directly to the stream without a detention basin. And that comes under the DEP's water quality requirements, which basically are based upon removal of total suspended solids, TSS removal. Because this is a pre-developed site with large areas of parking and roadways, the requirement from the DEP is 50% TSS removal. Our site plan is providing 70% TSS removal. And we have met with the DEP, and the way they calculate the 50%, it's weighted. If we do direct discharge, that area gets 0%. Our detention basin, one is rated at 80% TSS removal, the other at 67%. So when we do our weighted average of all the areas, we are providing 70%, which is in excess of the DEP requirements. We're required to lower the pre-developed flow rate to 50% of the 2-year storm, 75% of the 10-year storm, and 80% of the 100-year storm. We are exceeding all those requirements. For example, we're reducing the 2-year storm to 25% of the pre-developed flow. Flow to the stream, the entire drainage area that goes to Middletown Lake Cross Road is over 690 acres. So we comprise about 10% of the flow to that culvert. So any reductions we do on site will have minimal impact on the stream because we're such a small portion of the total drainage area. But our on-site reductions exceed what the DEP requirements are.
How do you know the stream can handle it?
How do I know the stream can handle?
How do you know whether the stream can handle it? I realize it says 80% of this, 50% of this storm, etc.
We're lowering what the pre-developed flows are. So if the stream is handling what's there now, we are having a positive
I asked the
impact.
question because the stream is barely handling what's there now.
And we...
Every home, not every home, but any with a long jumping brook on the other side of that street, and all jumping brook goes all the way down to Swimming River. And so during heavy rains, that stream it overflows.
We understand that we only control 10% of the drainage area. We are reducing the flows, so there will be a slight reduction in the stream, but we cannot control what's happening in a square mile drainage area.
What about if you've made your ponds, your 2 front ponds are probably 2 to 3 feet deep? Can you get it deeper to hold more water?
possible, but I've already stated we are greatly exceeding what's required now.
And I'm from what John's saying about that stream. If you doubled the amount of water that each one of those ponds, if you went from 2 feet to 4 feet, and I guess they're going to be vinyl lined to 2 in the front.
I'm giving the contractor an option of clay liners obtained from site materials on site or a PVC liner. They will be lined.
And cleaning of those ponds will be done by the association?
Correct. Ponds will be maintained and owned by the association along with the roadways and the whole stormwater system.
The chief concern everybody has, whatever direction it is, downstream, when Via/AT&T built the site originally, it redid the stream from here all the way the hell down to the other side of Leedsville to Shadow Lake. And I think it was almost a shadow.
It goes that the stream's on that wide road, but it goes all the way down to Shadow Lake. That stream.
That was whatever that was, 25 years ago at least. Nothing's been done since. And that includes the culverts, the streets all the way down there. Really, that's not your responsibility. And how the hell do you get a town to clean those things out, or anyone else is responsible for doing this? That was really causing the backups and the concern of any resident that lives anywhere south of the downstream.
I know it's not directly under your purview, but if you look at the environmental letter on number 4, yes, and if you see the area, thousands of geese land there all the time. All the crap goes into the water system. All those nutrients go down the stream, goes into Shadow Lake. Middletown has spent millions of dollars just clearing out Shadow Lake, really. All those millions, but quite a bit of money. And they even say how you can prevent geese from going to the area, especially you're going to have a lot of people there putting plants around the street, around the ponds, so the geese don't like to see that. But we do have, if that was just a little deeper, I think would be a little bit of a safety valve.
If you make it deeper, if you make the water level higher, I have to get the water to that basin. So that sets a low point of my site. If I raise the water level in these basins, I have to raise the back of the site by an equal amount. And that considerable expense, trucking in additional fill, raising the site higher. I can even get into issues with building height requirements because you measure your building height from existing ground. So every foot I raise the water in these basins, it increases.
I don't think Carl's asking you to raise it.
Lower
Lower it.
At the bottom.
Well,
Make the pool deeper.
Keep your outflow pipes at the same level, but by digging deeper, you can hold double the amount of water.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I'll explain more.
Okay.
We're 5 feet deep.
You're 5, okay.
And the depth with a safety ledge at 2.5 feet meet the DEP requirements. That calculation goes into the water quality calculation, the TSS removal for settlement. As far as reduction, the only amount of storage that counts is that from that pond surface to the top of your basin. So what you're asking me to do by making it deeper is make my basin higher.
Do you understand?
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Will the 2 front ponds be the ones that will have the vinyl liners or plain liners, and the other 2 which are sort of in the wild?
We're leaving those as is.
Okay, when you put your new ponds in, or your new detention basins, the water that's in the old ones, are you going to pump that into the new one, or are you going to get rid of it?
That would be up to the contractor, but these basins will probably be the first thing constructed. That's normally what they'll do. When it comes time to lower the other basins, it would only make sense to pump that water into these basins. You will have to, whoever empties those basins and fills it would have to get a pond lowering permit from the DEP, and you have to put together a plan how you're going to do it, how you're going to manage it.
Because I hate to fill up all of a sudden going into that brook again.
Right, and
Filled up.
the permit they need to get for dam safety in order to lower it would preclude them from just dumping it directly into the stream.
You questioned about geese before. The basins will both be completely fenced.
If I put bushes around the basins, geese will not go into that pond. You want to keep that area clean.
Our landscape architect will discuss that.
Okay.
But we're going to put a fence with mesh all the way around the basin. The sides of the basin will not be maintained long. They're going to plant it so it grows wild, make it hard for geese to walk through.
35 years ago when I played golf there were no geese. There was this little golf course.
I don't walk off.
It's
40 years ago, okay.
The homeowners don't like geese. If
No,
there is a geese problem, they will hire contractors such as geese police to, keep the area clear. I've met with your township engineer, discussed his review letter. We've agreed to meet all the conditions of his review letter. There's one condition that we need direction from. Plan that I call sidewalk frontage. It's in the packet.
EA12, I believe.
Is this part of the submitted set? Is this part of the submitted set?
That you have in your hands, I guess.
Anything that's part of the submittal set, we're not going to mark separately. But if you want to, you could, but typically the board's not going to mark the documents that are part of the submittal set.
The engineer's review letter asked that we put sidewalk along the frontage on West Front Street. We have 160 feet of frontage. That's a very wide access driveway, so the amount of sidewalk on the frontage would be minimum. And then the next request was that the sidewalk be put all the way up the access road and into the site. Well, after you get 400 feet into the site, we have wetlands on either side of the roadway. Makes getting permits difficult, not impossible, but difficult. We would request that we make a contribution to the town instead of building the sidewalk. If the town requires us to build a sidewalk, we hope that you make it contingent upon getting NJDEP approvals. And further that, if we apply to the DEP for approvals, it would be in our favor for the town to be the applicant. So if the township would agree to do that, it would make things slightly easier. But we would request that we make a contribution rather than build a sidewalk out to West Front Street, where there's no other sidewalk. It's like building a sidewalk to nowhere. So that's where we need.
There would be no purpose for this sidewalk in there.
I agree, that's why I asked that we make a contribution instead of going for wetlands permits, disturbing wetlands, adding impervious.
This is on which street? Is it on West Front, you said?
The sidewalk goes to West Front Street.
Okay.
I think the town has, particularly on all new buildings, they do want a sidewalk, so I don't know, it's kind of whether we can.
It's a long sidewalk.
It's about 1,400 feet from our site out to West Front Street, and about 1,000 of it would disturb wetlands.
You're going to have, of course, sidewalks in the main entrance off of,
Correct.
off of Middletown and Kirk Road, okay.
Again, it really comes down to the sidewalk ordinance. Per ordinance is required as part of the frontage. Ask for relief before you consider that.
Speaking to the mic, please.
You would have an in-lieu contribution if the board would grant that relief. If there is relief granted to south of West Front Street, sidewalk along Road G through buffer area probably doesn't make sense. However, if the board requires sidewalk on West Front Street, sidewalk along the driveway could make sense. Obviously, part of that subject to be permitted.
Why would that make sense, Robert? Why would that make sense?
If the board requires sidewalk to West Front Street, on West Front Street, it would make sense for it from the site to West Front Street, that sidewalk to allow the residents accessible route to West Front Street.
Why would residents walk to West Front Street?
They bicycle.
Many reasons why they could walk there, West Front Street, or bicycle, or...
There's no public bus stop in West Front Street, is there? Any buses, work buses, nobody goes there?
No, there's no bus.
School, secondary school buses.
There are school buses.
I think most of the residents tend to go to Lincroft, Middletown, Lincroft Road, and it takes a walk all the way out to West Front.
No, it's like Thompson Park.
Is that right?
It just doesn't make sense to put that little bit of stuff sidewalk in and go nowhere. I don't see any sense of that.
Goes to West Front Street Park.
You know, as Mr. Papa said, we're willing to make the contribution if the township decides in the future to put sidewalks along West Front. It's just,
Just to clarify, the contribution only applies to the portion of the sidewalk on public road. This is a private street. So the contribution doesn't apply to that. So the township ordinance requires sidewalk on public street. It's not an option, it's required. And so if you're going to have a sidewalk on West Front Street, it makes sense to connect it to the rest of the community. You have a lot of people who are going to live there, children, who are going to walk, bicycle, and they may be going to West Front Street Park. Just down to West Front Street. Maybe one of the academy, who knows, but that may be the way they want to walk, depending on which unit they live in. If they live all the way in the westerly end of the community, that would be pretty popular. In communities like this, the idea is to have as much pedestrian circulation, as much pedestrian access as possible, not to minimize it. The issue becomes, though, in the future, the homeowners association has the responsibility to put that sidewalk clear, but like this, when it snows, they've got to keep it clear for 24 hours and everyone else. And that's something that's been a problem with homeowners association community, but it's a requirement.
Yeah,
I reason not to do it.
I agree with that, and I was down there today, and there's other places further down that have sidewalks, but those aren't shoveled at all. So I know there's an ordinance that it should be shoveled.
I'm sorry, when you say further down, you're going to give us a point of reference.
Down toward Middletown, Lincroft Road. Like there's a little school there, and even parts of Oak Hill Academy that were not plowed. Okay. So I know, even in my own neighborhood, I know there's streets that aren't plowed, or sidewalks that aren't shoveled. So
The only thing we have to consider is Bath Hollow is going to go up in that area too. You're going to be looking at 2020, and you're going to have more people in the area. And they may use the sidewalk to be connecting.
Bath Hollow's the other side.
I understand that.
I want to ask a question, where are they going to walk when they come out here? There's not continuous sidewalks up and down, and there are no schools, or whether it's a small school, but there's nothing in general that people are going to walk to, so why would you want to add these little stuff sidewalks? Middletown's already littered with sidewalks to nowhere, so why would you want to add another one?
The answer is that the township frequently requested a small sidewalk where they don't exist, and then taxpayers have to pay for it. Where applicants and developers are building projects, that's the township's opportunity by statute, having developers pay for the sidewalk. So you're right, there are lots of gas and sidewalk put on, but one day we're going to build this as the taxpayer can pay for it, not the developer, we should have done at the time. In areas where sidewalks are appropriate.
Where they're from?
Clearly. They're, a very rural area, in Capitol Hill, maybe the roads and the sidewalks, and never will have sidewalks. The neighborhoods where you have a mixture, eventually they're going to want to get filled in, because people want to be able to walk safely. The claim we get is, my child has to walk on the sidewalk, then go out to the street for 100 feet, and then go back to the sidewalk. We want to try to eliminate that. And every place we can get a developer to pay for sidewalk installation, we should.
I think, yeah, if it makes sense, but here.
Well, the first kid who gets hit running, walking in there on the night, whether he's a teenager, then you're going to say, why don't you have sidewalks? I think we should have sidewalks.
So Carl, you can make that argument anywhere in town.
I sure can. And I've been doing it for the last number of years I've been here.
And it doesn't make any sense. can't plan for every accident.
I can plan for safety though.
I mean, we've seen time and time again where there's a proposal to put in a sidewalk that makes no sense. I think we need, Middletown does not have a smart sidewalk plan. It doesn't have a smart sidewalk plan. And that was something that should have been, that was identified in the master plan that was never done. So.
Actually, I disagree. Middletown's a very good sidewalk plan. It says sidewalks should be required on every development that happens on a street. Every development, that's a pretty good plan.
No.
They're required.
You
It's
look-
not optional, it's required.
No, there are, if you look at the ordinance,
There are exceptions.
there are exceptions.
Rural areas.
There are exceptions.
Rural areas.
Or there's minor development where it wouldn't make sense if there's no sidewalks in the neighborhood.
Right.
So there are exceptions. This would follow one of those exceptions.
Just make it easier for the court reporter. We're stepping over each other a little bit, makes it tough for us to know.
Ultimately, the board's got to look at township ordinance criteria that establishes the grading sidewalk. Meet the criteria,
That's right.
sidewalk, if it doesn't, then you shouldn't raise it.
Well, we can't, if it doesn't meet the criteria. We're waiting. Well, it is a tough call because, what is it, what's the frontage on West Front Street? 160 feet?
About 165 feet.
165 feet. And as Rob brought up, if we then have to put in the, and Tony brought up, if you then have to put the sidewalks all the way in from West Front, all the way into the development, if you will, that's got to be 1,000 feet, some large number.
It's 1,400 feet into the development. The first 400 feet isn't encumbered by wetlands. The rest of the way is.
The other 1,000 is.
Yes.
Is that a general permit? Would that be a general permit?
It's a general permit.
You have to, a little easier to get, not saying it's guaranteed, but and you agree that it's a little easier to get it as a GP?
Right.
It is a general permit.
Right,
It's a
you have
general
to
permit.
meet the criteria, as Mr. Pop indicated. This is one where it is more likely the township would get the permit than a private developer because they're going to ask some of the questions that some of the board members are, is what's the purpose of this, and the township is in a better position to be persuasive as to the township's interests of having the sidewalk. It's the board's call. We're requesting we understand the argument, and so two items. Number one, I'm not in favor of the township or the planning board making the application on behalf of the applicant for a sidewalk. That's number one. This is your application. It's your project. Your application. Number two, with regard to the ordinance, the requirements for sidewalks on the on all the developments, it's a requirement for a reason, so that as our planner mentioned, you can link all developments one after the other, not at the expense of the general taxpayers. So look, Mark, I understand your comments, but they're not applicable. And as a member of the governing body, I'm telling you now that I want to see sidewalks on this development from with the frontage and into the development. And it's just that simple.
Well, I disagree.
But you can disagree all you want, okay? I'm telling you, as a member of the governing body that sits on this planning board, I want to see the sidewalks. I want to see it. I want to see it on the frontage of the property, and I want to see it into the property. You have a major development here with lots of new residents here, and those new residents should have access to both streets, and it should be continual and not at the expense of the taxpayers.
Well, I guess I would just say it still doesn't make sense, even though you want it to happen.
Okay. It's whatever the board wants. I mean, you know,
If the board were to require it, the condition would read, they have to do it on West Front Street, they have to do it within the first 400 feet where they don't need a general permit. And beyond that, then, it would be dependent upon, as I understood, Commissioner Sabrina. it would be dependent upon them to apply in good faith to get the permits. If they get the permits, they build the sidewalks. If they don't get the permit, they can't do it.
That's correct. That's reasonable and understandable.
That's reasonable. And I didn't testify about one other thing. Back to the enlarged site plan. Part of the development, we will be rebuilding over 5,000 feet of the walking path. That was the existing walking path on the Avaya site. It will require permits to work in the wetlands and wetland buffers, but we've talked to the DEP, and those are obtainable permits. So we will be reconstructing the walking path, shown on this plan. There'll be several connections to our existing sidewalk system. Township engineer requests for certain signage and ADA compliance, and we agree to do that.
You have some bridges on that walkway too that you have to take care of?
There's 3 footbridges that were severely damaged in Sandy. We will be putting new bridges in. I have
good.
Okay.
I have one more question, just so it's clear. The development does not require any variance relief, it complies with all the zoning requirements.
That's correct.
I have no further questions from this witness.
Just one question. The homes with the cellars, will they be close to the pond or with the...
Some will be close to the pond.
Okay. Again, I just worry about the water table actually going into the homes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a little longer of the board discussing sidewalks, which is very informative but not anticipated in my timing.
Please raise your right hand. Swear to testify that the board is true, all due number of rules of the God.
I do.
And your full name, please.
Jason Tronco, Tronco.
And your business address.
Landscape architect, associate, Malillo and Bauer Associates, since '98.
Their address?
Sure. 200 Union Avenue, Brielle, New Jersey.
You're a certified landscape architect?
Yes, licensed landscape architect since 2002. Testified before planning boards in New Jersey, Middletown.
Tronco, you want to describe the landscaping that's proposed?
Sure. First, I'm going to go into the proposed landscaping and landscape features. For this, I would like to look at Exhibit A4. A4, perspective entry rendering. The entry sign feature shown here is a signage feature with 3 water features on either side of the sign. This signage is flanked by planting, evergreen planting, perennial planting, some annuals as well. This is set up as a tiered landscape feature on either side of the boulevard entry. At the center of the boulevard entry, we have a flag plaza or a flag area. Also some ornamental flowering trees, decorative pavement. This is all encompassed by a 3-rail vinyl fence. The entry into the site is lined with street trees, Zelkofa trees, shown at 4-inch caliber. Along Middletown Lincroft Road, we have red sunset maples proposed. Those are proposed at 3 to 3.5-inch caliber. In addition, there's a buffer along the eastern side of the proposed basins, and that's a mix of evergreen material, shrubs, flowering shrubs, and shade trees. Next, I would like to look at the enlarged site plan, A5. The next item for proposed landscaping would be the internal streets. All the internal streets of the site are lined with street trees of varying different varieties. Some of these varieties are red sunset maples, London plane trees, scarlet oaks, willow oaks, and green bay zelkoba. The next item I would like to speak about is the unit planting. This is the foundation planting around the units themselves. That is done with a combination of ornamental flowering trees, shrub planting, ground cover perennial, and some ornamental grasses. Next item I would like to discuss is the clubhouse and the clubhouse planting. That is on Exhibit 811. Looking at the small rendering in the top left corner, this is the clubhouse and pool area. The recreation area has been planted in a garden style with a mixed variety of, once again, flowering trees, flowering shrubs, ground covers, perennials, annual planting. The planting within this area separates the space into different outdoor rooms. These rooms will provide different activities and use areas. So for example, there's a children's play environment. This children's play environment is designed for various age various age children. The second area is a terrace deck, which is close to the clubhouse. This area is for outdoor sitting, dining, and relaxing, and this will be a 3-season space, separate from the pool area. The pool area is fenced with a pool enclosure fence for summer use, and it is separate from the other uses, so it could be separated. That area will be lit for safety, and not for use, but just for safety and just for illumination, really, just to add a feature for when people are overlooking that area. Tree species in the clubhouse area contain elm, Hinoki cypress, white pine, and some heritage river birch. The next item I'd like to speak about is the landscape buffers. For that, I will look at 8.5. If I could just back up 1 second, the existing conditions on site are staying intact. So most of the planting around the perimeter of the site is not being disturbed. There's mature sweet gum trees along Middletown, Lincroft Road, in addition to oaks and a lot of red maples. Along the south property line, along the stream corridor, there's very large tulip trees, additional sweet gum trees. There's groves of oaks, some hickory. Along the western property line, there's some of the same vegetation. Adjacent to the pond, there's again some tulip trees and red maple plants that like the wetter conditions. Along the north property line, a lot of the vegetation is staying in place as well. That's a lot of oak material, again maples, sweet gums. In this area up in the left corner of this exhibit, you can see a couple fingers of vegetation. Those are 10-foot high berms that exist as part of the previous development. And on top of those 10-foot high earthen berms, there's white pines and Norway spruce. Those evergreen trees are probably 30, 40 foot tall, and those are to remain.
Where's that located, actually?
That's located in these areas here, so it would be, on this map, the large site plan, it would be in what would be the northwest. Along the northern property line, but on the western side of that.
While you're talking about landscape buffers, I understand you just mentioned that's a 10-foot high berm. In the areas other than the 10-foot high berm, can you describe the landscaping that's from 0 feet to about 6 or 8 feet high?
Sure. So the remainder, yes, in the remainder of the buffer, we are looking to provide some grade change there, to provide a new berm. New berm is only a couple feet, 1 to 3 feet with the grading that we can grade up. But that is planted with some shade trees. I think there's, I have the numbers across there. Let me just check. So just speaking of the northern buffer, we have 33 proposed shade trees. Again, they're red maples, some sugar maples, sweet gum, sawtooth oak, and pin oak. In addition to the shade trees along that buffer, we have 81 evergreen trees. The evergreen trees are white pines, Norway spruce, Colorado spruce, some Douglas fir, American holly. And overall, with the planting on site, we used a lot of indigenous material. So a lot of the plants that you'll see on the site plan, on the landscape plan, are native pieces.
Along your northern border, where the homes are, and then when you have tennis courts, do you have enough vegetation from the between the Oak Hill Academy in your area as not to be a disturbance to your own homes? Because again, they're going to be adding another court over there in Oak Hill and Oak Hill Academy. Do you feel you have enough plantings in there? Do you have to increase?
Sure. There's like a little bit of play in those areas to add additional material, but there's not a lot because we want these trees to grow to their mature size. We want to give them room to be healthy, grow full. So within that whole buffer, those plants are pretty close to allow them to grow to maturity.
So the reason I asked you about the planting in the buffer zone from 0 to 8 feet high was so that we on the board and the public can get an understanding of what type of plants are going to grow from north of the berm from 3 feet to 8 feet, and then where the canopies are planned to start on the deciduous trees. So can you talk about that?
Sure. Along that buffer, there's evergreen trees, which will be planted at 6 to 10 foot at installation. So with an evergreen tree, you'll get the screening from ground level up to the top and with the taper. With the nature of an evergreen tree that tapers in, that's where you fill in with the shade trees. That'll give you an upper level canopy of screening.
And the underside of the canopy for the shade trees? Height above the berm?
Height above the berm for those trees will be probably limbed up to about 7 feet. So they'll grow from 7 feet up to maturity. They'll be 40-foot trees, 40, 50-foot trees.
So it's reasonable to say that again, up to from 3 feet up to, you said, to 9 feet, right? Looking at 6 foot high evergreens?
Yes, 6 to 10. We have a mix of 6 to 8 and 8 to 10 foot evergreen trees along there. I failed to mention the existing buffer, which is to remain. There's a good 10, 20 feet of existing vegetation that is going to remain. In that vegetation, there's a lot of understory material, American beech trees, deciduous and evergreen shrubs, ornamentals, herbaceous material.
So in elevation, from 0 to 3 is the berm, from 3 to 9 is evergreen, and from 9 above is deciduous, right?
Yes, evergreen would be from 0 to 9, but sure.
Thank you.
And then there are a few waivers we're requesting.
Sure. In regard to the Township Code 16622, this requires additional trees planted on site, no less than 10 per acre. I think the engineer has this calculated, or based on the acreage, we have it calculated at 679 trees required. We have proposed 600 trees. Again, we propose trees in the common areas, on the buffers, on the streets, to the extent that they'll still allow the trees to grow to a full size and a mature size. So we feel 600 trees is pretty much the capacity to allow those trees to grow to maturity.
And there's a large wooded area on the site as you go out to West Front Street, is that correct?
Sure. I'll look at the previous exhibit for that.
A2.
A2.
And
that area more than 7.9 acres?
Yes. I don't have the exact figures, but we're not removing much existing plant material on the site because the nature of the pre-development is that most of the vegetation is on the perimeter and we're focusing the development to the center of the site.
So if that area was excluded from the calculation, would we be meeting the ordinance standard?
Yes.
So, and again, we need the waiver, we're not arguing that, but we're saying it doesn't make sense to plant, we're maximizing it in the site, the open area of the site, and it doesn't make sense to plant trees in an area that's already densely wooded.
What's densely wooded?
We have a densely wooded on either side of what is considered Road G. That's the leg out to West Front Street. That's where we spoke about the wetlands. That is densely vegetated on either side of that roadway, very close to the roadway.
Densely vegetated is not densely wooded.
It's densely wooded. It's, again, there's a lot of red maples out there. There's sweet gum. In that area, there's various varieties of oaks. That also has an understory of American beech trees.
It's densely wooded, I've driven down there over 1,000 times.
It's wooded.
So would it be fair to say that to meet the calculation, if you potentially include the wooded areas if you use the entire site as a calculation? You achieve the number of trees required?
Yeah, I think your ordinance allows for us to account for existing densely wooded areas to compensate for some of the relief that would be granted. The ordinance says that you may waive, partially waive, or fully waive provisions of the section if heavily wooded areas exist.
My main point of view is that the neighbors on the north, where you have 5 houses, that they will have a real full screen. That's the main thing. I want to see enough trees there that they're not able to, you know, I'm sure you'll see some of the buildings, but they won't have the light infused onto their property.
Sure.
It'll be enough.
Did you say with your plan here that there's going to be more trees than there are today on the property?
Yeah,
There definitely would be enhanced buffers at the edges of the existing vegetation.
Across the whole property, though, you'd be adding more trees than currently exist today.
Sure, 600.
And you want to go through the next waiver request?
Sure. The next waiver is 16645 in regard to street trees. This requirement speaks about providing 1 tree every 30 feet of front yard area. Let me get into the numbers. If you took based on the engineer's letter, we're a little bit deficient in this requirement. We have provided provided 322 proposed trees. The engineer has it calculated to be 397 trees. That calculation was based on linear feet of the entire roadways. By the nature of the development, where the driveways occur, where street lights occur, intersection of roadways, it's a little difficult to provide that number of trees without taking some compensation for those things and those site features. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to plant a tree where a driveway occurs, or even adjacent to street trees or intersections.
Street lamps, you mentioned.
Street lights, yes. So we'd be seeking relief from the strict compliance of that section.
But you will keep in compliance on the main thoroughfare, Middletown Lincroft Road. We will still have the correct number of trees there.
Spaced at 30 feet, I believe.
Okay.
We're still in the same waiver area, 16645 street trees. This speaks about locating street trees closer than 25 feet to proposed light fixtures. We're asking relief from this waiver to pull a little bit closer. In some areas, maybe 20 feet from street lights with trees. We're going to work with the engineer to use more columnar trees where that occurs, but it is also a waiver that we are seeking.
So I previously talked about this with the applicant, felt that perhaps if they infringe on that, it might be an opportunity to reduce the amount of tree deficiency. Perhaps the different species you could put in, as the applicant stated, 20 feet versus 25 feet of street lights. And give the opportunity to provide a little bit more.
The last waiver I'd like to briefly speak about is lighting. This is a lighting requirement to provide a minimum lighting level of 75% of the average light on site. We're providing 0.5 foot candles throughout the site on roadways, parking lots, and sidewalks, exclusive of the trail. So in some areas we don't quite hit 0.5 foot candles. We'll be revising the plan to do that. So we do meet your ordinance in regard to minimum light levels. To get the minimum 75% of the average, in working with the lighting representatives, it creates higher light levels that are really not desirable. It could possibly create hot spots on the plan in areas. So we do seek that waiver.
As the board knows, it's an item we come across regularly, and I would support a waiver of this item, being we don't want to provide a lighting level that's so bright just to meet the ordinance requirement.
Are you using LEDs?
We are. Lastly, I'd like to just comment on the geese and the ponds. It shows up just faintly here, but around each of the proposed stormwater basins, we have an area of seed mix proposed. That area of seed mix is 15 to 20 feet wide. If we go to the yes, which is the darker green here. That is proposed basin side slope mix. What's in that mix is a lot of ornamental grasses, a lot of perennials, wildflowers, some of the oxtail daisies and some of the black-eyed Susans, and really colorful mix of herbaceous plant material. That plant material gets 2 to 3 foot high in maturity, so we feel that is enough to deter the geese from landing. I guess they don't want to.
They don't want to land. They can't see anybody, and they're worried about an animal coming out to attack them. That
predator will.
They will.
So we do have that proposed.
Just for the record, the witness was referring to A5.
A5, yes. A large site plan. I think that concludes the testimony.
I have no further questions, Mr. Trumbo.
I have another question. Are we good to ask questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. On your entrances, both the main entrance and the west front, can you just talk about lighting there? I see on the A4 drawing, for example, you have flags, so I'm assuming there's going to be lights there at night, but can you talk about the entrances?
Sure.
The lighting, and just one other quick question. At the west front street, will you have a similar wall and landscaping and the name of the development and lighting and so forth?
Sure. We have a sign. It's much smaller in scale. It's just an identification. I'm going to get you the exact size of that sign. That's a 11 foot wide by 4.5 foot high sign that has a sign panel in the center of 2 columns. It's also cultured stone with the decorative sign panel.
Just for the record, the applicant is referring to the landscaping and lighting plans that were submitted with the application.
Yes. In regard to the entry feature, typically the flag poles will have uplights. American flag needs to be lit at all times, so typically we'll put an uplight in for the flags. The signage walls, they'll have a floodlight, a ground level light that uplights the sign, so it becomes a feature at night when people drive by and just identify the space and identify the community.
you'll have maintenance individuals taking care of this area. For instance, if you had this cold weather, those pumps would have to be turned off and what have you. There'll be a full-time maintenance man on for the area itself. Because someone has to take care of this.
Just before Dave speaks, the ponds will have aerators, which help.
I understand, but I'm also looking at the water features that you have coming out of your of the walls.
Right, we would have a contractor that would be responsible to the association, but we would bring them on immediately. Sometimes it's the contractor who builds the feature, but they would come back and winterize the pumps and take that offline probably for at least 3 or 4 months during the winter season so that nothing gets damaged. And the same thing for the aerators in the ponds. They can go almost all year round if you want them to. But that's done and it's set up when we begin the community through the management company and the association.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else for landscaping?
That's in front.
That's okay, that's the whole point. That's good, okay. Okay. Is there anyone from the board to make as a specific question? Or we open this up to the public? Okay, we're going to open this up to the public. This is for questions and comments. Both. Okay. Yes, sir.
Joseph Pacelli, headmaster at Oak Hill Academy.
Please raise your right hand, swear that you will give the board's truth, whole truth, and the truth of God.
I do. Concerning what's there now, as we all know, there's a very large building that has to be demolished. Is there any protocol in place from the developers or from the board that addresses that question? The question of demolition, dust in the air, noise, is there going to be explosives? I have no idea, so I'm asking the question.
This is the Department of Community Affairs requires a demolition permit to be issued prior to the demolition of a building. In order to do that, they first require that any hazardous, anything that's in the building be removed. There's a strict protocol for that before the actual demolition permit is issued. There are also requirements for dust control during the demolition to ensure there's no impact on neighboring properties. So that is all regulated by DCA, and you have to get permits and ensure all that's being done properly.
Thank you.
Good question.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
You just want to please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about to give the board the truth, whole truth, and the truth of God.
Yes.
And your name and full address.
Linda Snyder. I live on 96 Leedsville Drive, one of the infamous feeder streets. I have a few questions. One, in all the testimony, we never spoke about the height of the buildings. I think they're supposed to be 40 feet as per the ordinance, so I was just curious, are they 40 feet from grade? I know you mentioned that the houses with the basements, you were going to be using fill in order to build the basements. So is that raising then the height of the buildings? If there's fill used? Yeah, okay. One question about the traffic study.
Wait a second, let's do it. This is going to get out of hand. You got to answer her questions.
Okay. You know what, we have a handheld mic, so we don't have to share. So, we have another mic, so we don't have to go back.
Thank you. In terms of height, yes, the height limit is 40 feet. and the township ordinance requires that to be measured from pre-existing grade. So there are areas of the site where we're building essentially at pre-existing grade. So we're measuring from that ground level surface to a portion of the roof, which is the mean between the peak and the eave. You don't measure to the peak of the roof. The ordinance in Middletown, which most towns use, is where you measure between kind of the midpoint, between the top part of the roof and the base of the roof. All of our townhomes will comply, even in instances where we know we're going to have some fill. We now have to measure that. The building doesn't get any higher. We just have to measure. In fact, we get kind of penalized for that fill. We have to measure to where the grade was before we built the house. So we have to make sure that our townhomes are not too tall, otherwise we would exceed that height requirement. So we intend to comply with that.
The traffic study, I think it was mentioned that one of the studies was done on November 6th, I believe. I think that was the week school was closed.
No.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, November, the counts were not done in November. No. They were done late September into early
Traffic
October.
impact study 11/6/2014.
I have it too.
That's the
Me
date.
too.
That's the date the study was published, not when the traffic counts.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. And then my other question was, I know when the last proposal was presented a while back, we had talked about trying to do some traffic calming down Turnberry and Leesville Drive. And is there any consideration to that along with this proposal?
Nothing is being proposed. We did have a lot of discussion regarding that at the last set of hearings. And I think at that point in time, that applicant had agreed to work with the town to provide some traffic calming measures should something be agreed to by the town. Mr. Fisher, I don't know, he may want to think about that. I don't know if that offer is still on the table or not.
They were talking about speed bumps.
You're going to have to hand the mic back and forth.
I don't know what the traffic calming devices were. I know that, from what I heard from John Ray, there was some dissension among people about what would be appropriate.
There was nothing specifically defined in the last application. However, it was agreed to that the applicant would meet with the traffic safety officer and discuss various options for calming traffic in the neighborhood. There was nothing specific, such as speed bumps or anything else, committed to it.
I agree, that's what I would, because it was controversial.
Yeah.
Those for and those against.
And Mr. Fisher has indicated that he's agreeable to having us meet with the traffic safety officer to discuss potential traffic calming measures.
Because even though it's a feeder street, it's still 25 miles an hour, it's residential,
Yeah.
a lot of kids waiting for buses.
I understand.
So if something can be done.
It's a little bit wider than a normal residential
It
street.
is, but that doesn't mean that there aren't kids standing there crossing those streets. My kids cross that street every day to go to their bus stop, so
I understand.
it's still a residential area.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
So that if this was to obtain approval, the condition would be that you're going to meet with the traffic safety officer and agree with whatever he says? Is that where we're at? Because otherwise, where are we? Well, you tell me.
We have no objection to meeting with the traffic safety officer and talking about ways in which to, control speeding through that neighborhood. I think that seems to be the biggest concern. It is a 25-mile-an-hour street, although it's probably used by a larger volume of traffic than the smaller internal streets. I can't agree to a condition that we don't know what the limit is on it in terms of improvements. So,
I think, talking about speed bumps is one thing, talking about doing a major reconfiguration of the road is something entirely different. And, so I think limiting it, to something comparable to speed bumps, there might be, signage, speed, bump out something, but, I don't want to suddenly say we're going to redo the road and narrow it by 10 feet.
Here's my problem. If I become the scrivener for writing up a resolution,
I know
what do I put in there? So I can't just say, and you'll talk to them.
Well, I think the other issue is you have to also include in such a condition that everyone on the street have to
Agree with
because
you.
you have to say one thing, have to say, I don't like it, it becomes impossible. I can tell you that we'll never allow speed bumps. We don't put speed bumps on public streets. Significant liability, no town in their right mind to do speed bumps. So, but there are other traffic calming measures you can do with the roadway, but you have to get people on the roadway who are going to now live with it. The person's got the bump out right in front of their house, might not like it, you know, so it's really hard to have an open-ended condition like that, unless it's something we try to resolve between now and resolution.
I agree with Mr. Mercatante, and also I think I remember something from the last year. I think we at one point talked about adding some additional, some of those the signs that show you what speed you're going. I think we talked about that. I don't know if anybody remembers that. That might be one thing.
Which that road is famous for, down at the...
Right, maybe adding an additional digital speed sign that shows the traffic, what speeds they're going, something along those lines.
That device in general tends to, I'm sorry?
It never worked.
It only goes on whenever they set it to go on. That's the thing. But
Right,
when
no.
it is on,
It's broken.
no, it's just not on. It's not broken. They just don't turn it on. They only turn it off for certain periods of time on certain days. But yes, that is been known to help situation.
Right, and the town I live in has a couple that have a solar panel on top, so it stays on all the time, and it even makes me slow down. Seats right there.
You're a problem. Okay, so
The suggestion for Mr. Keating is that it would be signage, striping, not speed bumps, not road configuration, and soft features, including your speed is, whatever you call it.
Limited to that,
And it would be on, signage, striping, including, the flashing speed signs, that thing. Can I ask, do you mean, is this on Turnberry, Leedsville, and Burley?
she's only on Leedsville.
Leedsville. Leedsville is the only Leedsville speed road.
Right.
I mean, Turnberry as well, I'll speak for them too. I mean, it's all,
Well,
people come down, Turnberry, turn to Leesville, and go up Irving.
I wasn't trying to say where they should go. If I have to write it down, I'm just trying to get an idea of
Leedsville.
just Leedsville. That's the word, Leedsville.
There were a number of people from Turnberry, I mean,
Yeah, Turnberry as well, yeah.
Well, the public,
Sternberg is a entirely different type of street. So, yes, it does have the traffic, and people do come down there, and you get to Leedsville, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're throwing this open to, what are we going to do to every street?
you can't, because the Middletown Traffic Department, if people speak to them and they consider it, they will put one of those radar signs on your street if there is a problem, if there's a continuing problem, and they will issue tickets on the street.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, yes, ma'am, right here.
Could you please raise your right hand? Swear testimony about the good board, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And your name and address.
Arlene Elliott, 10 Seagull Lane. I'm personally opposed to any waiver that restricts or gives the developers the ability to not plant those trees coming in off West Front. They're asking for a waiver because there are trees there. We never have enough trees. And the other question I have is, when I was listening to the landscaping, I kept thinking that we're talking these little teeny trees that really don't provide any kind of buffer. But more importantly, since I live there and I see these, this herd of deer that circle the property day in and day out, I don't think any of that landscaping is going to last more than a season. And it sounds like I'm being silly up here, but I'm not. I mean, I don't know of any plants or shrubs that, given the weather out there, that they're not going to be. So the question I have is, who's responsible for replacing all this? Because it's not going to last more than a season. And, you know, I can look out my window and I'll see 10 big ones just circling the property, and they live over there.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch, where do you live?
Kensico Lane.
See.
Yeah. And they just circle the property, and they're gonna, the landscaping, you're not gonna have any left. So unless you can pop in and say it's all, you know, it's not your food, you're not gonna have anything left.
What's the performance bond?
The performance bond is a 2-year maintenance bond on completion of the project.
Which means, within that time period, anything that gets eaten, dies, or whatever, has to be replaced. But it is a question for the landscape about there are deer deterrent shrubs, bushes, whatever. Is there any thought to that around the buildings themselves, the low?
Yeah, Jason can speak to that, but before he does, what I wanted to say is that when we have these plantings, we get a guarantee from our landscaper, number one, and that ensures that they're good for usually at least 1 year. However, we also have a transition with the homeowners association, and they always ensure that all the street trees are alive, that all the shrubs, common area plantings, evergreens, and everything else are in good condition as we turn over the community for full maintenance by the association instead of the developer. So there's a long period of time where we're responsible for those plantings, even beyond our contract with the contractor, to ensure that the plantings are hardy, that they're in good shape. And so that takes place over the life of developing the project. So keep that in mind. And then on top of that, I think our landscape architect can speak to the types of species we propose.
Sure. We get this a lot lately. When you have snow cover on the ground, the deer don't have the food resource, so they have the tendency to experiment with other ornamental plants and plants in your landscape. So over the last 2 years, especially, it's been a difficult situation. The way a lot of the deer-tolerant manuals are written, they speak to how seldom, often they're damaged by deer. Deer will eat a lot of stuff when they really need to. Some of the stuff that we have that they don't eat are a lot of the ornamental grasses, a lot of the evergreen trees, other than arborvitae. They don't really touch the evergreen trees. The shade trees they don't bother except for some buck rub, rubbing their antlers on the trees. But in a development like this, the best deterrent to the deer is activity. So when you get activity on the site, when you get people living there and construction, the deer tend to stay to the edges, they stay to the natural environments, and they don't tend to wander into areas where people are. But a lot of the proposed planting is deer tolerant. Not deer proof, but deer tolerant.
Do you use any natural herbicides during the warm weather which can deter the deer naturally? That they have out there.
Yeah.
That do work.
Some of them are like daffodils, planting daffodils. They don't like them.
Natural spray product.
We find that they run off in rain.
No.
So when the rain hits them and you're spraying off.
You have to spray it in the plant.
It's a difficult situation, but some of the grasses and a lot of the trees, the deer don't bother.
You need a break, or you have a lot of Well, I guess the question would be, how long we're going to go? And, that would determine how much for...
Well,
Are there any more
How many
comments?
people out in the audience, as the public, are looking to ask a question or make a comment? Just for a show of hands. How about we just, can we finish the next two?
We promise you at 10 o'clock.
Okay, next session.
Make it quick.
Promises.
Swear testimony that you give the board's truth, whole truth, and nothing so help you God, and your full name and address.
Roger Foss, 21 Green Grove Court in Winthrop. I just want to add my comment, though it may not be necessary, in favor of the position taken by Mr. Middletown and Mr. Severino with regard to the sidewalks. It's very, very difficult to encourage pedestrian traffic through these suburban communities. As many of you know, I've been working at that for about 15 years in the Lincroft area. I appreciate the comments by Mr. Davis, but it's not consistent with the results of our work, our research, and the experts that we've consulted. We really want this large community to be well connected by walking paths to the neighborhood around it. There are parks, there are schools, all the other facilities in the community. I hope I don't have to say anything more about it, because I think everybody understands that there was a reason for that ordinance to be adopted by the town, and this seems like one of the best instances where those sidewalks are going to add something to the quality of life. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Swear testimony about you give the board the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God,
Yes,
and your name and address.
Jeffrey Blumenau, 92 Lehigh Drive in Lincroft.
Before you begin, last go-around, you were represented by counsel.
Correct.
Are you represented by counsel now?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Just wanted to go back to the commentary with regard to this issue of having a cellar, because it shows up in the plans that have been before you for consideration, and I'm trying to define in my mind what that really means. During the testimony you've heard tonight, at least 3 times the gentleman who first presented referred, in fact, to that area as basements, not cellars. So I would like, for purposes of not just myself, but for the community as a whole, to understand what cellar means when it's done, whether it is in fact a finished area, whether it in fact is used, and if so, in what fashion, how does this affect, and why is it a consideration in today's development before you?
I think I can respond. And I apologize for saying basement. It's just we rarely encounter an ordinance that calls something much like a basement a cellar, but that's how your ordinance defines it. What it means and how it's different from what I guess most people would consider a full basement is that you're limited in terms of the amount of exposure along the foundation walls. You cannot have more than 25% of your foundation walls exposed. So it limits how much you see around the edge, the bottom edge of the siding, and that stone or stucco concrete strip before you hit grade. So we've designed the homes that have cellars in accordance with the township's ordinance to meet that requirement, and it's not considered a story in the township's ordinance. If you have a full basement, it is. So these would not be finished. They would be tall enough to be occupied by someone who wanted to go down there and store materials or put a ping pong table downstairs. But it's essentially an 8-foot space below the building that acts like a basement, but it's called a cellar, and that's how your ordinance defines it. So we've designed the grading so that in no instance would there be more than 25% of that area around the perimeter of the building exposed.
You're not doing any finishing off in that?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Are there going to be any, like, sump pump pits in those cellars?
Yes, we would. Whenever we install what we would call a basement or a cellar, we'll put a sump pump pit hole and a pump in.
Real pump in?
Yes.
So from an odor in the cellar, or basement, whatever you want to call it. They can do anything they want in there that a normal basement dwelling can have.
I would think so, yes.
They can even finish it if they want to.
Subject to permits, yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Our ordinance makes a definitional change between basements and cellars.
It was done many years ago. What was happening was, because we have a lot of sloped properties, you can have situations where people would build a basement and then 2.5 stories above it. It would look like 3.5 stories because the entire wall is facing, the entire front of the house is facing the street, or in some cases facing the river, depending on how you're looking at it. And they appear to be a whole story higher than they were allowed to be. So that's why the definition is such that if you were building a basement which is more than 25% exposed, that's going to count as a story. So you don't get another level above that. If you put it 75% more below ground, you can still build 2 stories above.
So we have a definitional change, basically. The definition that says if you have 25% or more exposed, it's a basement. Under 25% exposed, we call it a cellar.
Yeah, so what will happen in a case like this, as they apply for each set of building permits, they'll have to submit a specific grading plan for each building to show that no more than 25% of that lowest level is exposed. And each one will get inspected, will get reviewed to determine that they comply with that. If they don't, they have to change it before they issue the building permits.
But it's uneven. Do you take the mean?
We literally take the square footage of area that's exposed, so we have to measure a lot of triangles and map the geometry of it. Very precise calculation.
And yes, sir, in the back.
Abe Littenberg, 41 Hickory Lane, Lindcroft.
Please raise your hand. Swear to testify about the words of truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Could you spell your name for the court report?
Littenberg, Littenberg.
And again, Mr. Littenberg, you were represented by counsel before, were you not?
That's correct.
But you're not represented by counsel tonight?
That's correct.
Okay.
In regard to the fill, my question is how much fill is going to be brought there? And how does it affect the runoff? Is this going to create problems for the neighbors in that area? People at Seagull Village and the schools? Is this going to create a problem where more water winds up on the surrounding properties?
We're bringing in the fill so that we can direct the runoff from the entire site, or most of the site. Some of it goes through the stream to the detention basins. The site slopes from Seagull Lane down through our site. There's going to be drainage coming from Seagull Lane onto our site, not the opposite way around. So by bringing in the fill, it allows us to direct the water to our detention basins.
So could you indicate where the fill is needed so that you can meet this definition of a cellar?
Well, the fill isn't really the need a definition of a cellar. And like I said, we're meeting a definition. We are not exposing any more than 25% of the foundation walls. That's the definition of a cellar. That really doesn't have a lot to do with the thing.
My understanding from...
It allows us, I'll explain. It allows us to bring less fill because we're going to leave, let's say, 18 inches to 2 feet of foundation exposed, rather than fill right up to the bottom of the foundation. That allows us to bring slightly less fill onto the site by exposing part of the foundation. But we won't expose any more that puts us in, takes us out of the definition.
And has this plan, the runoff from this property, been examined and to the satisfaction of T&M Associates?
We reviewed the plan. We have a number of comments. They indicate they will address our comments. So through further revisions, we'll get it.
And in addition to T&M, Monmouth County Engineering Department is going to review the stormwater design. Freehold Soil Conservation Service is going to review the stormwater design, as well as the NJDEP. It will be the most reviewed part of this application.
have discussed with the applicant, have discussed them, I met with the applicant, we met with the applicant, the plans. One of the issues that we're having issues in the township is speed issues along Middletown Road. One of the things we're looking at right now is to try to put some warning signs for the local academy school, solar power signs on each direction. Just pointing roads that are coming up, there's school there, so that they slow down. I asked the applicant if they got to the point of proceeding with this application, if they would agree to install those two signs. It's relatively inexpensive, just like we're talking about solar power signs. I would just suggest to on Middletown Road to extend the local academy school project.
Not along this applicant's frontage, but closer to Oak Hill?
It starts on this applicant's frontage on the and then goes up to the intersection.
We did talk about that when John Ray was testifying, it may have been before you, you came in, but that's one location where I think it makes sense to have those warning signs. And,
We talked about the entrance at the intersection.
at our intersection?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
For the crosswalk.
Well, like your intersection, we're going to put a crosswalk in there. Later.
Okay. That's fine.
Anything else from the public? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
First testimony doesn't be board, should hold you another person on the yard?
Yes.
Full name and address, please.
David DeSocio, 36 Bluefield Road.
Can you spell your last name, please?
DeSocio. Question is, would there be any signs prohibiting a left turn out of the development onto Lincroft, Middletown Lincroft Road? So that you can't make a left and then go right into Turnberry?
There's no prohibition against left-hand turns out of our main entrance. In fact, we have 2 lanes there for that purpose. There's a divided boulevard with 2 egress lanes so that they have a separate lane just for left-hand turns.
So will be allowed?
Yes.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else from the public, I move we close the public portion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So moved. What else from the board? Questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 questions for Mr. Fisher. The first question is, we didn't talk about the construction of the buildings. Are they going to be fire suppressed?
We don't anticipate it. I mean, 2-story townhomes are not required to be by code, and we've never added fire suppression to traditional townhomes. We do for 3-story townhouse condominiums, but not for 2-story. That can change by the time we build this, but I know the legislature...
Being that the roadways don't allow access to all sides of the buildings, that would be a consideration, I think, of your part. The network of the roads, you're basically only getting access to the fronts.
Yeah, they are just 2-story structures, though. They aren't real large, as you saw from the elevations. But we'll look into it.
Would you consider it?
I could say we would consider it. I can't say we would agree to it. I'm not directly involved in construction decisions for our company. I know that issue's out there, and I know the types of buildings that we do add fire suppression for, and we've never done it for 2-story townhomes.
Being the fact that we don't have access to all sides of the building presents an issue to the fire department, due to the network of the roadways. The other question I have is the planners report that's dated February 10th. 3A is circulation. The applicant has not provided a turning template for emergency vehicles. We refer comment to the fire advisory board to assess the adequacy of site right access for the necessary emergency vehicles, particularly in the clubhouse area. Will you be willing to work with the fire advisory board to satisfy their request upon a condition of approval?
We'll satisfy the request to put the turning templates on the plan and show it to your planning board engineer.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
One question. If you, in your contracts, would you either say we cannot have power generators in a home, or if they do, if they do want them, you have a certain sort of specified area? Because I have a feeling you're going to be asked that.
Yes, I think we can agree to that. I wouldn't want to encourage them. I don't know that we can absolutely prohibit them.
I'm not because it's becoming a, especially when you're looking at folks who have houses with head generators, they may want them in their
Understood, yeah. So we'll, as I think Mr. Harrison said, we'll come up with language in our
whether you want them or not.
right, in our master deed, and it'll be very restrictive if they're permitted at all.
It would have to be. Generators that somebody wanted to use, a neighborhood that close together. Everybody's using a gas generator, they'll asphyxiate themselves in about an hour.
No, it's natural gas. It's natural, it's a little cleaner with natural gas, but it's been out there though.
Anyone else? Right. Let's say a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the plan, Middletown Planning Board number 2014213 for Four Pond Center, with the number of variables included, and meaning that we have to add to them.
Which variables are those, including variances?
All the variances that we've spoken of.
No waivers.
No variances.
Design waivers.
Design waivers.
Right, I think there were some issues about
Air conditioners,
the
Trees.
trees, the sidewalks, the crosswalks being lit. The sidewalks, as I understood, the consensus was that they were going to require it on what's front, and also on the road in, if they can get the general permit. I'm just looking through my notes quickly. Mr. Porcelli had asked about a condition on the ACA demo permit, which is easy enough to do. They're going to meet the traffic safety officer about Leedsville.
And if we can possibly get the blinking crossover light, as well as the warning sign for the slow down for the school.
And Mr. Cardell raised the issue a few moments ago about fire suppression. They said they were going to consider it. I don't know whether or not, I mean, that would be the extent of the condition that would be considered, they would look at. And also the circulation template required for fire department. There may be a few more within the record tonight,
With that addendum, I make the motion.
Second. Roll call.
Hold on a second. What did we say about the waiving the tree fee?
Just so it's clear what we're asking for, what your ordinance requires that the fee is based on open areas of the site, and what we've talked to your professionals about, and they said raise it with board, is deducting the area of road frontage, the stretch of road G that leaves the developed portion of the site going out to West Front Street, exclude that from the calculation, and then we would pay the fee for the shortage less, for the remainder of the site, which seemed to be a reasonable approach given the wording of your ordinance.
Yeah.
We'll still owe money, in other words, just a little less.
So that's clear.
That's what it comes in, yes.
Mrs. Farrow?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, with comment. I want to congratulate the team for this design. I think it's a very nice craftsmanship home street plan, and I think it fits the site very well.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Ostrander?
No.
Mr. Rafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Sedambrino?
Yes.
Mrs. Shewitz?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time this evening. And we will go for Michael today.
So moved.